everybody, and welcome to our launch party for our newest issue, Joy from an Unexpected Journal. I'm Carice Gilliland. I'm co-hosting today with Zach Schmall, and I think I'm just pointing the wrong way, but that's okay. And we are going to talk today about the theme of joy. So I'm going to let Zach introduce himself a little bit as our managing editor of an Unexpected Journal and kind of explain what an Unexpected Journal is and what our mission is.
Yeah, well, thank you, Chris. I'm so excited to be here with you today. I mean, most of our readers probably are familiar with you and your work, and they've seen you on video before. But it's awesome that you're jumping on board today. So thank you for joining me here today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's super fun. We're gonna have a great day. We have some fabulous panels. Joy from grief. Joy from the transcendent of a pleasurable experience, photography, multiple mediums, poetry. So buckle up, everybody. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, and like Curry said, I mean, this really is a massive endeavor because what we are at an Unexpected Journal, we are a bunch of, well, I guess now it's Houston Christian University alumni.
Right.
I know. I saw your mug earlier.
Yeah. I got to change that to a C.
I know I have to buy a new polo shirt now, I guess, or something like that. But we're a bunch of alumni from their Masters in Apologetics program. And I mean, Chris and I were very early in the program. We've been graduated for a while now. Yeah, and what we seek to do is kind of appeal to the truth of Christianity through reason, but also the imagination. We feel that the imagination is really an opportunity to connect with people on a level that maybe really resonates with their heart, resonates with their soul. And we don't dismiss reason by any means, but we complement it in a kind of a more comprehensive and fulfilling approach. So that's what we try to do at an Unexpected Journal. And we've been doing this, man, it's almost 5 years. We'll have our 20th issue this Advent season. So this is issue 19. We've been doing it for 4 3/4 years, I guess. And we've had writers from all over the world, all over, from a variety of different backgrounds, from different, Chris and Carla and I were talking before the show. It's really an amazing thing how many different people from so many different places.
Yeah, and when the Bible says to take every thought captive, we mean our imaginations too. And when C.S. Lewis is talking about his conversion, he talks about reading Phantastes early on and his imagination being baptized. So we're hoping in this work for the imagination of our readers to be baptized, but also that reason and imagination would come together in a way that our modern culture really keeps separated. I was laughing because the other day I was thinking about how long we've been doing this and how it got started. I believe this is right, and somewhere I have the screenshot of it, a conversation between the two of us where we were bemoaning the fact that there was not a journal for our writing. And I was like, well, let's just make one. You're like, well, let's see if anybody wants to do it. And lo and behold, all these other people wanted to. The Lord provides. He sends just the right people at just the right time. As always. And here we are about to have a birthday, right? 20th issue birthday. And so it's really exciting. And we hope that people who are out listening, if you haven't subscribed to the journal or found us online at an unexpectedjournal.com, that you'll look us up. We have back issues on there that you can read. You can also order individual issues in print to keep, or you can create a library of the Unexpected Journal. And the great thing is, if you're doing for any kind of research on Christian writers, we've probably written about them. So there's a whole issue on Tolkien, a whole issue on Chesterton, Lewis, imagination, stories. If you enjoy superheroes, we have that, music and film. It would make a great gift if you're looking for a gift coming up at Christmas, is stick one in stocking. So yeah, perfect timing for that. I think joy, the world could use some joy right now. There's kind of a heavy time for a lot of people. And it's hard to understand that happiness is transitory, but joy is eternal and transcendent. And I think we're going to explore that today. And when we look at joy in the midst of grief and joy in the midst of really trying times. So if that's some of your situation and you're struggling to find joy, or you really are celebrating finding joy in a tough time, like this is a great spot for you to be this afternoon, to listen with us and to go through each of these different panels. If you are looking for a way to watch us, you can find us on Facebook and YouTube, on LinkedIn and Twitter and Twitch, and Amazon Live too, I think. And I want to reiterate that we're going to actually have giveaways. So if you love winning free stuff like me, then you're going to want to be definitely present for the giveaways. Just a special note for that. I'm reading this note to make sure I get it right. People watching on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and LinkedIn can enter the giveaway and comments, and your comments will show. So that's Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and LinkedIn. If you're on those, you can enter, and your comments are going to show up when you enter. But if you're on Amazon Live or you're tweeting it out on Twitter, like maybe you're doing a live tweet of stuff while you're watching, or you got on to watch your bestie, then you need to go to one of the other locations in order to enter the giveaway. So if you're on Amazon Live or Twitter and you want to win something, which we know you do, you got to go to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, or LinkedIn to make that happen. So just a little side note for those of you wanting to comment or enter a giveaway, we do welcome comments. So as you're listening to the show through the different panels, we would love to see your questions. We would love to see your comments, and we do pull those out and we do talk about those in the session. So please go ahead, feel free to enter the conversation. That's the fun of these big launch parties. You are a part of it too.
Absolutely. And I will say, I mean, last time one of our best questions came from Twitch, which is so cool.
Yeah.
It's so cool. It's such a cool opportunity. And I thought, like, wow. I mean, I think of Twitch for video games. I don't think of Twitch for apologetic content.
No,
but and it's awesome and it's so cool. Like, I was so grateful that person wrote in. So hey, if you're listening again, comment at the end. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's maybe before we roll too, maybe we should just talk about the schedule for today. So
let's do it. Yeah.
Like Harry said, I mean, maybe you're here to listen to your best friend, or maybe Harris and I are your best friends. I don't know.
I mean, who could blame you?
Exactly. So right now, obviously, we're welcoming you. And then at 2:15, and these are all Central Time, by the way. From 2:15 to 2:45, I'm going to be talking to Kim Jacobson and Donald Hatchings about sounding joy. Then right after that, Carice is going to take over and do some interviewing with myself, Sherry Eben, and Jason Monroe about joy in the moment. We're going to have our first giveaway. Again, #joy on any of those platforms that Carice mentioned. We want to give you free books.
Yes.
It's fun for us to put books in your hands. We want to do that. Right after that giveaway, I will be coming back with Megan Riles, Donald Williams, and Annie Crawford, talking about Glorious Joy. Carice will be right up after that with Jasmine Biggs and Sonia Howard, talking about Joy from Ashes. One more intermission and giveaway. Then you hit me one last time with Joy Incarnate with Seth Meyers and Tommy Darren Liskey. And last but not least, you hit Carice with Abiding Joy with Anne Gallagher and Annie Nardoni. And at the end, we have a main giveaway, which is a whole year subscription to the journal in print. So we'll mail it to you directly for a year. It's awesome. I mean, how much better can it really be than to get a free book mailed to you 4 times a year? It's just fun to get a surprise in the mail, and it's an awesome opportunity. So please, #joy, and please join us in the comments. We would love to hear from you. Like Harry said, we want this to be interactive. we have awesome speakers or awesome panelists, and they're going to be talking to each other, but you can talk to them too. Like you can join in, and if you have a great question, a burning question, let's see what they have to say. They're very smart, very bright people, and it's going to be an awesome time today. We're about ready to take off during that segment, but Carice, do you have anything else that you want to add in before we charge ahead?
I was just going to say it's a great opportunity to talk to the authors. Very rarely do you get to talk to an author of a piece and ask a direct question. So I think that's a great opportunity. We definitely want to take that. And I'm so glad to be here today and super excited about this entire issue. I hope that everybody watching will look over the schedule and choose the sessions they want to go to, and we will see you there.
Awesome. All right. Well, here we go. We're headed for takeoff, I suppose.
And we go.
All right. Well, hey, everyone. Welcome back to our first panel of this launch party, Sound and Joy, with Donald Hutchings and Kim Jacobson. So welcome. Thank you both for being here.
Hi, Zach. Thank you.
It's so exciting to see y'all. And Donald, you're the journal people. Kim, this is your first ever contribution. So
yes, it is.
It was so cool. I didn't mention it in the intro, but I will say, if you hear things today and you're inspired to write something, always feel free to submit to us. We love to hear from you. We're all new writers to the journal at some point, so we're so grateful to have you here. And I thought I'd start out just by asking each of you, and we'll start with Kim and then Donald. Maybe you could introduce yourself real quickly, and also just assume the audience hasn't read your article yet. But maybe what would be the Cliff Notes version, just kind of a summary, so they understand what we're about to talk about.
All right, sounds good. Well, my name is Kim Jacobson, and I just love to write. I currently just started an MFA in creative writing at the University of St. Thomas at Houston that I get to do online, but I currently live in Oregon and enjoy lots of outdoor activities. The story I wrote is a fiction one, and it's about Nick, who is a soldier, retired now because he was diagnosed with a rare liver disease that is actually terminal, and he suffers a great deal. He's been through Desert Storm, things like that, and because of the suffering that he's seen in the world, he stopped believing. So the story is about how Nick is processing through his suffering, and then at the very end is going to give a little bit of joy a try.
Yeah, and it's a great story. I had the pleasure of, helping edit that one. It's a wonderful story, so I totally recommend it to all of you. Thank you, Kim. It's awesome to have you here. And now, Mr. Hutchings, for people who don't know you.
All right. Well, my name is Donald Catchings, and of course, I tried to make my pen name as long as possible. So Donald W. Catchings Jr. just sounds nice. I guess I'm proud of my name. And I guess I'll first say that I was actually privileged enough to be one of the editors for Kim's piece. It was very nice. Actually, I think the ending is the best part of the entire work. I mean, as a writer, I will give my opinion on that the end of this story is worth getting all the way through it. It has its ups and downs. Sometimes they're happy moments, sad moments, mostly sad moments. But it's that ending. It really touches you, really hits you. And especially for us who have, all people have, for those who have experienced suffering, when you get to the end, it kind of gives you a little bit of a courage, a little bit of a push to think more like a child. And it brings you back home. Anyway, I don't want to say too much, just in case somebody's interested in reading it. It's a good piece. Now, as far as me, I'll keep it simple. I'm an author. I am a teacher, and I like to say I'm an apologist. I hope I am. I also have a small publishing company, and I'm always putting out new work. I'm putting out new work. I have a daughter who's 9 who's actually writing and publishing, and I have my wife is writing and publishing, and we're kind of a writing publishing family. And if you want to know more about us, inkwellandpenllc.com, and check that out, and you'll be able to see my work, their work, and anything I've written on an unexpected journal. Quite a bit of it has been excerpts from longer works, but there are plenty of poems that are only published there, and some articles. And you can just check out my style of writing on an unexpected journal, see if you like it, and go check out my fiction stuff and see if you like that as well. Either way, I always try to write something good and twist it. And so this piece that I put in here is an excerpt from a much longer novel, a dystopia I've been working on, that definitely has some good twists to it, has some good ups and downs. But I will say this, though it is a fictional piece, it actually is, strangely enough, born out of an autobiographical piece that I've written and never published. I actually wrote it was in my first class. I was in creative writing for the apologetics program, and I wrote a memoir piece with Dr. Ordway, and I'd never done anything with it. And so I kind of twisted and morphed it a little bit, and of course changed it around to where it's a young girl who's experienced what I actually experienced in real life to a point. And that's what this story is about. If nothing else, those who have experienced loved ones, grandmothers passing away who were close to them, and especially grandmothers who may have had things like Alzheimer's or dementia, or even grandfathers, Alzheimer's, dementia, something like that. And you hold their hand and you talk to them, and they're childlike, and it's very difficult to go through because you're very close to them. But also somehow being able to find joy in those last moments with them, that's what my story is about. So I don't want to give too much away on it either, but that's me, and that's my story.
I love it. No, it's awesome. And I will say Donald is one of the most prolific writers I've ever met. The dude is always putting out content. I wish I was that productive. But I love how you both contributed stories. And I wanted to start, you're both authors, obviously, and you're both good at it. And, for some people out there, they might not think about, like, storytelling as either an apologetic or a way to communicate joy in kind of the spirit of this issue. So I think I think I'll start with Kim again and Donald after, and then obviously interact all you want. But I'm curious why you saw the prompt joy, and I'm wondering why you thought like, oh, I'm gonna write a story about joy. Why is story such a good mechanism for conveying something like joy? So let's start with Kim, and then we'll go to Donald.
Well, it's so interesting that you say that, because when I wrote this story, I did not have joy at all on my mind. And it wasn't until I've been checking out an unexpected journal and the different themes. And when I saw the theme of joy, I thought, wait a second, I think that the shoes fit this. And I'm fairly new to becoming a Christian via Catholicism. In the last few years, I was unaffiliated for a really long time, probably from childhood on. So many decades of being unaffiliated. And I have a really big piece in my heart, like a calling, I think, to try to help the unaffiliated, because I spent so much time there. So when I write, I can't help but write from this position of how unaffiliated people feel. And there's so much questioning. There's so There's so much suffering that you're noticing, hypocrisy, and you're trying to sort of maneuver the waters of this. And so now that I've written a lot before becoming a Christian and a Catholic again. So this is all new for me. The Shoes is the first story that I wrote as a Catholic. So I wanted to incorporate that feeling of what it's like to be an unaffiliated and to just not be sure about this whole idea of a spiritual world even, and let alone the idea of joy.
Oh, I love that. And I love hearing the backstory because wow, now that you say that, you can see that theme plowing. Like that's so interesting. I love author conversations. This is so cool.
And it's a big reason why the whole story of Nick had to happen in the basement of the church. It had to happen down. It had to happen in a dark place that has no windows. And then when he ascends to actually attend the wedding. So it has a lot of symbolism there. And that basement has a purpose to being unaffiliated and experiencing so much suffering.
Oh, that's so excellent. Oh man, I love that. And Donald, how about you, man? Like, why did you? I mean, like you said, and I also didn't know yours started out as kind of a autobiographical, obviously modified and morphed and all that. I didn't know that either, so I'm learning so much today. But why do you think story is such a good mechanism for conveying joy?
Well, I think Kim started to speak to it really well. It's whenever you are, let's say, whether you're unaffiliated or whether you're someone who's struggling, especially going with some difficult situations, you don't want people to preach to you. You don't want to hear preaching. People who are unaffiliated or people who are going through hard times, they don't want to hear preaching. But you tell them a good story. That's a different story. I hate to say it that way, but really it is. It's different. When you hear a good story, you're willing to take it in. When you watch a good movie, you're willing to take it in and you're willing to let it affect you. You let down those watchful dragons. It's not well, it is sometimes, but usually I don't think is it academic essays that are going to break down those walls or philosophical arguments that are going to break down the walls. It's philosophical arguments that come across in story. It's academic language that's dumbed down into story, dumbed down, I guess you could say morphed, transformed into story. And I don't go into writing these stories thinking academically, thinking philosophically, and then trying to convert it to a story. What you do is kind of almost more natural, almost more realistic. You write about real life. And then as being a Christian, you can't help but put yourself into it. You can't help but put your thoughts, put your experiences into it. And so that becomes the really effective thing when you're writing apologetics and you choose to do story instead of essay. You're trying to reach the wider audience. You're trying to reach the broader audience. You're trying to reach those who would never read an essay of C.S. Lewis or never have and wouldn't even want to in any way, but they will read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. He's going to say the same thing in both his essays and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but everyone, even a child, can get The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. When you go read the essays, when you read the academic work, not everyone gets it, and it doesn't touch their heart the same way because it's just not the same. It doesn't feel as human. I know I could have a lot of arguments about that, but just stories are more human than philosophical arguments on a broader scale, I think personally.
That's so interesting. Stories are more human. That we'll make that in like a quote graphic later, and that'll be our. I like that. No, but it is right. I mean, humans are, and I don't mean storytelling creatures in like a pejorative sense. I don't mean it that way. It's not like we lie. We're not. It's not like you tell a little child, "Oh, you're just telling stories." We like to recount our past and to tell what happened. We like to tell. So stories can be true. They can be fictional. Or fictional stories can have elements of truth in them. But I think you're right. It's very human to want to connect to stories. I mean, that's, well, not to get off on the giant tangent that maybe either of you want to comment on, but that's why, I mean, it's so important that, right, Jesus became flesh and dwelt among us. Like he entered into the earth story as a human like we are. That's significant from a storytelling perspective.
Yes.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? Anyway, sorry, I'll get back on track now. My bad. But both of you, it's interesting. Your stories, and Kim, you alluded to it already. I mean, there's some dark moments in both of your stories, and this is an issue on joy. Um, but I think there's something to that. Um, yeah, why do you think? And also with Donald this time, then Kim, I'll alternate. Why do you think maybe portraying sadness actually helps us kind of communicate joy? Like, why do these hard things help us point to joy?
I'll let Kim take it first. I like ladies going first, so I'll let her take it, and I'll try to pick up off of whatever she has to say.
Sounds good.
I think we need that balance. So without darkness, we don't know light. Without sadness, we don't know joy. And one of my favorite lessons that I do with my freshman English class when I taught them in high school, Plato's Allegory of the Cave, and I'd lead them through it. But first we'd turn all the lights off. And then at that moment when the prisoner is released and he feels the blinding light, he sees the blinding light, I turn the lights on, and the kids are doing this, and we need those moments of darkness in order to experience the light. We have to, or we wouldn't fully understand what joy is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, Donald. No, you're sorry. No.
You know what? I completely agree. And to draw, I guess I could draw some of the underlying imagery from my story is overall the entire novel, or the entire dystopian. It's going to be a series, In Their Mother's Arms. And actually, imagery wise, it's actually Saturn versus Jupiter kind of thing, where Saturn is, for those who don't know, the imagery of Saturn is often the old, cold, and ugly. It's death, Chronos, time. But Jupiter is joy, and it's brightness and joy, and there's courage and love and those types of things. And the way I like to explain it, especially to younger people, is to help them understand that I don't necessarily say that we have to experience the darkness in order to see the light. This is a good point, but the way I usually try to bring it across is more like the two are fighting. It's like a fight, but joy's never really fighting the old, cold, ugly death. Actually, joy is the ultimate outcome when death dies, when the old goes back and reverts to the young and the eternal, or when the ugly disappears and meets the beautiful. The point is, Saturn or Chronos, time, death, ugliness, sadness, they end. But when they end, the only thing left is love, peace, mercy, joy. The goodness of God is what continues. So we see them kind of in a conflict, but they're really not necessarily in a conflict. It's just that sadness automatically leads to joy because sadness ends. Death ends. Death will die. But joy, love, mercy, kindness, these things, they do not end. They keep going. And so kind of in my story, that's one of the points I make. The grandmother comforts the granddaughter kind of imagery, where it's really a mother comforting a daughter, but for literally in my own life, kind of having that mindset of the older person tells the younger person, don't worry about me fading away and dying, because Saturn, or Narutos in this instance, the character in my book, the bad guy, he's looking to kill you. He's looking to take your life. He's looking to make you suffer. But what he doesn't realize is that in his suffering, leading to death, leads to his own dismay, leads to his own defeat. Because in death, we conquer the thing, death, and overcome it with joy. And so I think stories of sadness lead to joy naturally in a spiritual sense, because sadness, the darkness, dies and the light continues when the darkness is gone. Going back to Plato's cave, I guess.
That's a great point. That's interesting, and I I mean that's one of those great lines near it's the end of Narnia, right? Where everything sad is going to become untrue. Isn't that the end of? Some C.S. Lewis scholar will shred me at some point, but that's okay. But you're right. I mean, sadness does have an end point. And we know that biblically there will be an end to sorrow. So I like that. That's interesting. And both of you have touched on this a little bit already. Um, but I'd like to, dig into your stories a little bit more and about some of the images that you've used, just to kind of, yeah, it's always interesting to hear authors talk about why they chose the images they did, right? It's interesting. And Kim, you mentioned some, and Donald, you mentioned some, but maybe there's some other ones you haven't mentioned that I find it intriguing because it's so cool to see kind of that writing process that works. So we'll start with Kim again.
So I think the primary image in the story is the crucifix, and how Nick hadn't really thought a lot about the crucifix, honestly. Jesus on the cross, he knew obviously Jesus was on the cross, but there's a moment when he realizes that Jesus is pierced on the same side that Nick is, because of where his drain is. And he had never noticed the piercing before. And so there is this moment of that image of the crucifix coming into play. And when I write fiction, I don't have an outline. I let the characters tell me their story. And in many regards, it starts out with just, it's almost like they're knocking on the door of my imagination saying, tell my story. And sometimes I just see an image. And I saw this image of these siblings descending into this basement, and it just took off from there. So I didn't know the crucifix was going to become a major image in the story. It just worked out that way. That's what Nick saw at that moment. And then later, the images of some of the statues, St. Patrick and Mary. And sometimes the statues are a difficult thing for people that aren't Catholic to understand. Why do they exist? It's like idol worship. So I like to try, I think it was a moment of just saying, hey, this isn't idol worship. This is akin to, you wear the jersey of your favorite sports team, your mascot, you wear it, you are identifying with it. It doesn't mean you idolize it. So in the same way, when those statues are seen by Nick, it's him sort of identifying with those for the first time, really identifying with them, sort of the way someone identifies with being a Chicago Bear, for example.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I also, if I could just follow up with one quick question before you go to Donald, Nick seems to have a special connection to one priest in particular, right? Mm-hmm. He really seems to identify, or the priest seems to kind of touch him and connect with him in a way that maybe a lot of other, a lot of maybe other religious people in his life hasn't. So I'm curious, was there any real life inspiration for that priest, or was that someone you met?
It's interesting because the whole reason that I came back to Catholicism and my husband converted from Lutheranism to Catholicism is a priest. And so I do like to bring that in. Like, a lot of people have had bad experiences with priests, which is horrifying and sad and all the rest. I like to bring in the fact that there are really good priests out there. And this particular priest has touched a lot of people in his, honestly, joy. So what drew me to him was his joy. He came to actually minister to my dad when my dad was dying, and I just called up. I wasn't even a Christian or a Catholic, and I just called up our parish and said, "Can you send a priest? Because my dad loves Catholicism." And so it was just this priest's presence and his joy as he walked down the hall that drew me to him. And that started a whole conversation. So definitely, I'm sure that priest's influence came into play with the story.
I love that. Yeah, I was curious when I was reading it, so I had to ask.
Yeah.
And Donald, how about you? How about some of the images in your story beyond what you've already told us about?
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess most of mine really do reflect off of light and darkness in some way. Light, darkness, death, rebirth, uh, being a child versus being an adult, being an elderly person versus being a teenager. It's kind of the process of life is the overall image, I think, that really resonates with me within my own work. When you read it, you'll realize that one of the scenes is taking place on a beach. There's a rising sun and a blowing wind, and there's the young woman and the older woman walking together, hand in hand, walking together, the flowing wind. The imagery is beautiful. And yet there's the contrast that the moment is beautiful and yet sad. So it's the contrasting points of light and darkness, constantly walking in this beautiful place with the rising sun where life is coming up and yet also life is ending. With the woman about to say, the mother about to say to the daughter, "I'm dying soon. I won't be myself, but don't worry." And then the daughter having to accept that, and that is a reflection back when with the story is very layered. I love to do layered stories. My wife doesn't necessarily like it because it's confusing and it's hard to edit, and she edits my stuff, so it gets very difficult. But it's a layered narrative because what it is you're having a memory. A young woman is walking into a room, seeing her mother dead, and it's quite a horrific thing to see someone you love laying lifeless on a bed. And when she does, she thinks back to a moment when her mother was telling her she was going to die, but the moment is beautiful. Sunrise, beach, beautiful. And then she walks forward to her mother and grabs onto her and remembers the things that her mother has said to her. She's feeling the coldness of her dead body, remembering the warmness of her live body before. And then she has this moment where she's able to look over to her father figure and give him comforting words. And so there's this constant back and forth. The imagery that I like to use is there's light and darkness, there's sadness and there's joy. There's the older comforting the younger, and then the younger comforting the older. And that is joy in the end. That is the joy of life. It's a cycle that I wanted to show. Life is cyclical, but it also, in the cycle leading to joy, is the inevitable, again, the end that will be in joy. We're in a cycle of death and pain and life and rebirth. All people through all time have seen it, they have known it. But Christianity shows us that yes, there is that cycle of life, pain, death, rebirth, and so on and so forth. But those things will come to an end. And they come to an end in Christ, who is love, who is joy. And I'm hoping that imagery comes out even just within this short excerpt. Actually, I'll go ahead and say it. The words that, I've never told anybody this, I don't think. The words that Darling, the main female character, says to her father are the exact words that I said to my grandfather when I watched him crying next to my grandmother's bed. And I walked in the room, she had passed away, and he was sitting next to her crying. And I walked over to him, and I knew he would know what I meant when I said it, because it's the words that David said when he heard that his son had died. And the idea here is simply that he can't come to me, but I can go to him. And so I told my grandfather, she will not come to you, but you will go to her. And that is one of the most powerful things that I had ever heard. My grandfather was the one who revealed it to me and taught it to me when I was young. Of course, I put it into the mouth of the female, and then the female says it to the man, and so on and so forth. But for me, most of that story really resonated between myself and my grandfather. And I turned it into an autobiography, kind of transformed it into this story. And that is the imagery I want to see. We cannot draw the dead back to us. We cannot draw pain back to ourselves. But we can let it go. And we can move on past the pain and past the death. And we can and will one day go into life. And that's the imagery I hope is seen.
Man, well, that's awesome. And I mean, man, I love doing this stuff so much. And then I realized we have 1 minute left, and I have so much more I want to talk to you all about. But before we go, okay, really quick. First of all, is there somewhere people can go to find out more about either of you, like just other writing you do, or maybe you have a website, something like that? And then just one really quick tip, about how, do you have like one writing tip? I like to ask for writing tips in your authors. So let's start with Kim. Where can they find you? And one really quick tip for writers.
I'm a bit of a social media recluse, so I don't have anything like that where anybody can find me, although I did write a nonfiction book that's still on Amazon, but it was under Kim Robinson, my former name, called For Underdogs Only. It's completely different. It's a nonfiction book about the true story of a football coach. Anyway, that's about it for me. And my favorite writing tip is let the characters tell you their story.
Perfect. Thank you. And I mean, I love football, so now I have to go find your book. Thank you very much. And Donald, where can they find you? And one writing tip.
Well, I'm all over the place. Have my own website, DonaldWCatchingsJr.com. I also have our publishing company is InkwellandPenLLC.com. But I'm on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and just always putting out new content just for fun. And if you look up my name, Donald W. Catchings Jr. on Amazon, you'll find me. Also, I write with a family pen name we use is H.A. Harper, and there's some more lighthearted stuff and some good poetry we've published through me and my family writing together through that name. And anyway, so look into it, check it out, let me know what you think. And then as far as a writing tip, I'll give a tip that I gave the other day. Kind of generally made a little TikTok video about it, but this is a personal writing tip I like to say even to all my students. The first sentence, the very first words, the hook, it's important, extremely important. And actually, matter of fact, I think the hook often makes the book. Just my opinion, but that's how I look at it. Whether you're writing an academic essay or whether you're writing a really long fiction piece, that first sentence, it better be good.
Yeah, I hear you. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you both being here. Again, this has been Kim Jacobson and Donald W. Catchings Jr. with me, Zach Schmall. Now we are going to transition. Carice is going to come back, and she will be interviewing, me, as I wrote something, and Carrie Evans. So stick around after the video, and thank you guys. It was awesome having you here.
Thanks, Zach.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to session 2 of our launch party. So enjoy the moment. And I'm Grace Gilliland. I'm co-hosting today with Zach and filling in for Carla. And I am joined again by Zach and Carrie. And I'm going to let y'all introduce yourselves and tell our audience a little bit about you and just kind of get to know you. So Carrie, if you'd go first.
Sure. My name is Carrie Eben, and I live in Siloam Springs, Arkansas, just really right on the edge of Oklahoma and Arkansas near a university called John Brown University. And I have been married for nearly 27 years now. I just launched off 2 children. My son just graduated from JBU. My daughter just enrolled at JBU, so she's there, and I am in the throes of empty nesting, and it is wonderful, and a little sad, but mostly wonderful. So my husband and I both work from home. My husband has a business in the telecommunication industry. He is a consultant. I also have my own consulting business as a classical educator. So I've been in the classical education community for over 22 years now. I've been in classical schools, and I homeschooled my children for the last 12 years. So I really am empty nesting, it's like twofold. They are out of, I am a retired homeschool teacher, and I can't say I'm a retired mom because you never finish that.
No.
But I did follow my daughter to school a little bit. I am actually adjuncting for integrated humanities at John Brown University. So, I have the opportunity to stalk her in chapel.
Absolutely.
I am all for that.
That's just the Lord working that out,
Yeah, so I'm kind of loving life. I'm in a PhD program, the same program I believe Zach graduated from at Faulkner. I'm almost halfway finished with that. I'm part of the Society of Women of Letters. I love that group of women, and I'm really a big cheerleader of classical education. We started a school here in Northwest Arkansas. Jessica Hooten Wilson and she and her husband and the Wraiths, we started a school here called Sager Classical Academy. And it went from 50 in their first year, and we're in our 4th year, and it's 170 students. So
fabulous.
We're on the governing board there, but it's just, I'm in a lot of things. I'm a little scattered there, but anyway, that's enough about me.
Well, that's awesome. We're so glad you're here. We're so glad that you submitted to the journal. I'm just super excited to have you here today with us. All right, Zach, tell us something about yourself.
Something about myself that y'all don't know. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Zach. I'm the managing editor here at An Unexpected Journal. Like Carrie said, I did get my PhD from Faulkner University. I wrote my dissertation on G.H. Chesterton and his economic theory, distributism. Let's see. I recently published a book, Disability and the Problem of Evil, through Public Philosophy Press, also run by another Faulkner graduate, so we're everywhere. HBO and Faulkner, they're just everywhere. HCU, I'm sorry. I'm going to mess that up too.
I know.
Well, HCU is everywhere too.
I put a C right there.
So bad. But I'm an adjunct professor at HCU. In the I even work there. I better hit it right. I taught ancient philosophy and culture last spring in the MA program, and I teach Intro to Humanities at Southeastern University. I'm doing that right now. Beyond that, I'm an insurance underwriter by day, but nobody hears about that. So
and you play soccer.
I do. So I do play a sport called power soccer. It's played by people in power wheelchairs, 4-on-4 on a basketball court. We have Vermont. I've been playing for almost 12 years, so I love doing it. I was at practice this morning before I ran in here to do this.
There you go. So y'all just have a few things going on, so that's good, right? All right. First, we're just going to let you talk a little bit about your work that you submitted to the journal, maybe the title of your article and the theme of it, and how it relates to the theme of joy. Carrie, would you like to go first again?
Sure. So the title of my article is Meticulous Mycologist.
Uh-huh.
Of course, I had to put the alliteration in. I just
I
love
love
it.
it.
Meticulous Mycologist, How Beatrix Potter Inspired C.S. Lewis's Joy. How I came upon this whole idea is it was actually started by one of my Faulkner classes. So I had a fine arts class. You probably had it back with Dr. Help me out. Now I can't. Whenever you want to remember somebody's name, it just
yeah.
And you had to watch the Ring Cycle. You watched the Ring Cycle, right? All of Wagner. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I did. I watched all of Wagner. That did not make it into this article, but I did think in my paper I mentioned Wagner, so we had to watch that whole thing. But it was a fine arts class, and I was thinking about what I wanted to write about, and we had to write a paper on something to do with the fine arts and beauty. And so really the article was mainly about beauty and the beauty of Beatrix Potter's work. But really, when I started researching her, and being a classical educator, I love Beatrix Potter. I've loved Beatrix Potter since I was a little girl. My favorite aunt collected all of Beatrix Potter's works, and I still have not seen any of her. I still need to go to the Lake District. It's on my bucket list to go to her house and the places that she had there. But there's something magical about her work. And I was rereading C.S. Lewis's Surprised by Joy, and I realized that there is something magical about her work. He found that magic and that joy, and so her stories, her little tiny stories, and little tiny books that little children can open up, with their hands. Her art is just very attentive to every detail, and so children are just drawn to this magic, of nature that she draws. But she was a very attentive artist, really just a very attentive person overall. I think if she was an Enneagram number, she would be a 1.
A 1.
I was typing her. So it's just it's easy to understand why her works and her pictures really can draw out this sense of wonder and joy. And that just got my imagination going of why it's so important too to have beautiful books available to children with these beautiful pieces of art, and that children can see. Because if it affected somebody like C.S. Lewis, these tiny little books, who else might these books affect, and what kind of joy do they bring? And he uses that specific. He was using that specific term. He highlights, out of several different experiences. One of the ones that he remembers most significantly is reading Squirrel Nutkin and just being completely transported to another place and feeling some longing. Like he just was longing to go back to that book, to look at it again and again and again. And it was almost like an addiction, but not a bad addiction. It was not like what we were talking about, I think, in Zach's article and Jason's article. It wasn't a manufactured happiness. It was something true. And so it was a true longing, and he relates it to something that, God had placed there. It was kind of a soul longing for, and I'm thinking about doing my dissertation on poetic knowledge. And so I really have been paying attention to moments like this, of little moments that people can receive truth out of different poetic experiences, just like C.S. Lewis did. So I just enjoyed reading all about her and why she, maybe how did she get to be so attentive in her own writing and her own drawing. And she was that way from a young age, but really the things that kind of made her stand out and helped her communicate that joy to C.S. Lewis was really her attention to detail, the way that she told truth in her tales. So she didn't hide the hard things. So you're talking about in the episode before this about having, light and dark. She had episodes, in her little books, bunnies almost were eaten or captured. So she did not hide the truth. And then she also, these books came out of love. So they were stories that were written for really for her friends and for children, other children that she loved. And so that was all, I think, received by C.S. Lewis when he was reading these books. So anyway, it was really a fun connection that I made.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was going to be my first question for you, was to talk about that connection between C.S. Lewis and Beatrix Potter in your article, because I loved that. It made me think of, the whole scene where he's writing about boxing and he and his brother are playing, and they have this whole imaginary world, and that's so Beatrix Potter, right?
Yes.
And I think she's fascinating in her attention to detail and attention what she chooses not to put into her story, because they're simple. They're not long, complicated stories. On the surface, you think, oh, I'm just reading these cute little British cat nature tales, but there's so much more in the depth of what she chooses to say and do in her stories. And I love that. That's the eye of an artist.
Right. Well, he just keeps talking about, how he just kept going back to the books, even as an adult, it's still, there's still this longing. And he also realized that he compares it. This was not in the article. I think this was in my original paper, but he compares his experience, the beauty of her work compared to some of the other works that he was drawn to, like as an adolescent, that were like swashbuckling tales that were, major heart race. And he compares that it was a different longing. So one was a longing for joy, and one was more of a longing for temporary happiness, because it was a thrill.
Yeah.
And he said that was something different. And, I think Charlotte Mason calls that kind of book twaddle.
Yeah.
So, and we're all attracted to twaddle. I mean, if we're on Facebook and we're on TikTok, I mean, we can get totally we can get totally, sucked into the twaddle and, the acedia, I call it, it's our acedia moments, that it's just more and more, it's just, lots of things that don't really have meaning, things that we shouldn't love, and so the joy is the things that we should love. And we're drawn to this. So I like that he makes that distinction between things that we should love and things that really just leave us feeling empty inside.
Yeah. Things that are truly beautiful, things that are truly transcendental versus things that are just transitory.
Right.
Yeah. Zach, tell us a little bit about your piece.
Sure. So yeah, ironically, my piece also has a distant connection to Faulkner as well.
Yeah.
Because I first read Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury at Faulkner. And we all know Ray Bradbury from Fahrenheit 451, right? That's what you think. And this is a very different kind of tale. And it's a series of vignettes. And so obviously I'm not going to recount the whole book for you, but one vignette, you find a man named Leo Hoffman. And Leo gets this idea in his head that maybe, just maybe, he could make a machine that could manufacture happiness. And his intentions are relatively noble. It's not like he's trying to brainwash people or hurt people or harm people or put them into some kind of like,
it's not like Matrix, particularly.
Yeah,
it's more like, I'll do this good thing for humankind. Like, yeah.
Exactly. He's like, it would be really great if people could be made happy, because being happy is good. And nobody really believes him, just like most like creative people and artists. Everyone's like, you don't know what you're talking about. And so he ultimately, he perseveres and he does it. And it's kind of a telephone booth looking box. And he finally convinces his wife to to try it out. And at first, she's really happy. She's seeing the Eiffel Tower and she's seeing London. And he even makes it like have like different aromas in it and all this wonderful stuff and music. And life is going fine. And then he hears her crying. And he's heartbroken because he's like, what did I do? Like, I wanted to create happiness. And my wife, and he loves his wife, my wife is crying. And I don't, she ultimately, to summarize her response very clearly, I think one quote says it best. I never even thought of being in Paris in my life, but now you got me thinking, Paris? So suddenly I want to be in Paris, and I know I'm not. I think we all can identify with that somewhat where, maybe you didn't feel like you were missing out on anything until someone told you should want that thing.
Yeah.
Until someone told you, right, Paris should make you happy. You never really, I mean, sure, it might be fun to go to Paris, but now it's being labeled as Paris will make you happy, and you realize you don't have it. And then you say, oh, I'm actually really sad because I've never been to Paris. And so he's distraught and she's distraught, and life really isn't going so well. But the point I try to draw out in my tale is that Leo, for all his flaws, and we might get into this later about is it even possible to manufacture happiness, but for all his flaws, I mean, he really believes and aspires to do something good for people, and he believes it's possible to have joy. And so in my article, I compare him to being a supernaturalist, and acknowledge that, again, it is perhaps a bit shallow that you can put someone in this telephone booth and they'll be happy. But, right? But he aspires and he believes that happiness can be pursued. He believes these are good things. Kind of like we talk about pursuing virtue, he's pursuing happiness, and that's good. Now, his wife, on the other hand, I compare her to more of a naturalist because in the quote I read to you from her, she kind of wants to forget about parts of the world that she can't have. She'd rather never have known anything about Paris, even looking beautiful in a photo in a booth, because now it makes her want to be in Paris. And I mean, you hear about this in Chesterton and others, kind of being like prisoners in this world. She wanted to kind of lock down her world so that she wouldn't encounter anything that might make her long something more. Whereas her husband, again, misguided as he was, at least aspired to something like happiness, to pursue happiness. And Bradbury doesn't use happiness in a shallow way, and I won't ruin the entire end of the story for you because it's a beautiful conclusion. It's clear that when he uses happiness, he's touching on what we as Christians might call joy. He's not just saying temporal happiness. I won't tell you how it resolves, but it's I do have my article, so I guess you had to read my article.
There you go. That's a good feed-in. And then we're talking about both of these people looking for joy, looking for happiness. So we're going to move to the question of joy in communion. So they're trying to commune with nature, wanting to, maybe you could say commune with science, but in a sense, like go and do these other things. The common theme in your pieces is that joy isn't something that we can make, right? It reminds me of in Harry Potter when they do Felix Felicis, right? And they're going to try to manufacture this good luck and all the things that go wrong with trying to control that. So the idea of like controlling joy and trying to control joy in Dandelion Wine, I think, is very interesting. And to wonder some little inspired from some of those mishaps of people coming through to that. But the question about joy in communion is, and your joy in communion is happening in different ways. But the question is, joy is found in communion, whether it's with nature, family, ultimately with God. That's a common theme, that joy must be something that's found. So Beatrix Potter finds these things in nature. Obviously, the man attempting to manufacture joy is trying to find it. Can y'all talk a little bit about finding joy? Someone's looking for, and does that work? How does it work? What do you think?
Well, I was going to say, thank you, Zach, for your article, because dandelion wine has been on my list, and it's going in my Amazon cart like today, because I love Ray Bradbury. And I was like, I need to read this book. This sounds like a thread that I want to follow, obviously, because we're here in the same section.
Yes.
This is a similar theme. So now I'm so intrigued. But and Mike Young, that was my philosophy professor.
Yeah, me too.
Dr. Mike Young, I love him. So anyway, so I'll just jump in and say that I think really true joy is something that needs to be caught, and it's something that cannot be manufactured. I was telling my students this last week, we had been reading Oedipus Rex and Antigone, and of course you have the fates, and they try to control what is supposed to happen. So things are prophesied, and they try to take matters in their own hands, and then all of these other things happen because of it. And I was telling them when we do that, when we kind of take control and we don't let things just kind of play out. I know in my own life, when I try to push something to make it happen, it usually does not work when I am really trying to force something. And I think the same thing can be said about joy. It is something that we kind of receive, that we and that we can't really make, but it's something that we receive. And I think in Zach's article, he was talking about G.K. Chesterton, talking about receiving that and then feeling grateful, this gratitude. And I totally resonated with that, because it's something that we receive. It's not something that we can force or make happen, but we do realize that it's a gift. It's a gift that is coming to us. And so I think we have to just realize that we have to kind of rest in the joy, and we wait for those moments. We keep our eyes open for the moments, and we don't actually busy ourselves so much that we miss those moments. We take the time to be able to see them. Otherwise, we will miss them. And if we can't make them, and we're not watching out for them, we will miss them.
Yes. That's absolutely. And I think you'll miss wonder too, right? Because if you're not open to joy, then you're never going to get wonder, because you're not grateful and your heart isn't open to that. All right, Zach, what do you want to add for that?
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting, because the lesson of the whole story that Bradbury, he's pretty blatant about it, is, any attempt to pursue happiness and force it and manufacture it is going to fail. And you kind of see that there are other vignettes about the story that would correspond with that. I didn't obviously incorporate them all into this article, but it is really interesting, because, and I like how you were talking about Beatrix Potter, and there needs to be that childlike acceptance of joy. You said rest, and it's really a childlike thing too, because there's that trust that, like, your parent provides for you and your child, well, God can provide you with joy too if you rest in Him. And so I think, it really dovetails nicely off of your article too, that, wow, there's this gift of joy and we can have it as Christians, right? It's not, we don't have to force it. We don't have to rush it. We don't have to push it. God provides it, and how much less pressure is that on us if I don't. You see, we were talking about what social media earlier, right? And man, like people feel like they have to manufacture their lives and show their friends how much fun they're having. Because my life is awesome. That's a lot of pressure. But how much less pressure is like, man, God gave me this great life already, and I didn't have to do anything to earn it. Like, how much better is that? It's so much like more in terms of mental health. It's so much healthier for all of us. So, yeah. Anyway, that's just kind of my thought on manufacturing joy and how that might resonate.
And spiritually, it's interesting too. If you think about Galatians, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And that means it doesn't come from us. So we're not making that. We're receiving that as a gift. It's a gift from the Lord. And it's so, I think, being in love, or if you've ever had that kind of relationship or watched people in middle school who are in love with someone who's not in love with them, like it's humorously tragic, but it's how it turns out, right? But we laugh at that and kind of, love on it. But as adults, we're really not that far off, right? We're chasing it on Instagram, we're chasing it on social media, we're chasing it with each other. We just call it different things. Sticker on so we can feel better about it. But yeah, completely agree. We should not manufacture joy. I loved that your articles were both in that conclusion and thread, but from totally different vantage points. So I think if you enjoy thinking about technology or even the scientific ideas of humanism, which that would be Jason Monroe's article, and then Zach's article with Ray Bradbury, and then all the way to Carrie with Nature and Beatrix Potter, you definitely want to check out this issue of An Unexpected Journal. Before we go, because we have like 1 minute, I want to give you a chance to tell people where you can be found, your website, where they can find you. So Carrie, let me let you go first.
Sure. I have a website for my classical consulting business, and you can find other things, other podcasts and articles that I've done there. Hopefully, the Unexpected Journal article will be on there very soon. But you can find me at www.classicaleben.com, and I would love to hear from you. You can give me your email and we can connect. So thanks. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, that you were here. All right, Zach.
Yeah. So, yeah, you can find me online, zacharydschmall.com. I do try to semi-regularly blog there. I do send out a monthly newsletter too, so certainly sign up for that. Goes at the end of the month, so not too far away. I better get on that, I suppose.
All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much for being here today. We loved having you, and hope we get to have you again for another issue. So,
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Patty. Hey, we're back on the break from the giveaway. We're in the extra time for the giveaway. Zach, do you want to talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah. And
my first giveaway, and I don't really know.
No, it's so cool. So what you need to do, okay, if you're watching this on Facebook or any most Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, all you have to do is put in #joy. So #joy in the comments. That's it. It is not difficult. It is not hard. And it's then at the end of this little break here, we will we'll put all of the entries into a random hat, and we have a whole website that does that. and hey, someone's going to win a free book. Then we'll ask that you email us at anunexpectedjournal.com, just so that we can have your address and we can mail you a book. It's hard to read your mind, so we have to have that. But it's pretty easy and it's pretty cool. And while we're talking about giving away books, some of you might be wondering, like, okay, I hear you. Maybe you're here because you're friends with Carrie or you're friends with Therese or you're friends with me, and you're like, I don't know if this is really for me. I don't know if an unexpected journal is really for me. Oh, perfect. See right there.
Yes, we already have
See?
somebody. Y'all, if you want to get in on this,
That's how easy it is to do. And it's going to be really, like, unsurprising if we have one entry. So we run a lot
yeah,
of
a little suspense would be great. I mean,
Right, I mean,
we
it-
just learned, we learned in the last segment that you can't manufacture joy, but it turns out you can win some today. So
yeah,
hashtag joy, and you can
we
get
will
it.
send joy to your mailbox.
We'll send you some joy.
But yeah, so as I was saying, you don't maybe know if this is for you. But we'll give you a free digital copy of our first ever issue. Carice, you wrote on that issue, right? The Abolition of Man issue?
Mhm. Oh,
Yeah, and so we're in there. There's a bunch of other awesome people, and we'll just send it to you for free for signing up for our newsletter. Um, and then you'll know if it's more for you and if you want to subscribe, if you want to buy them for your bookshelf because they're beautiful. And just a shout out. She's not here today, but Virginia de la Lastra, the best cover design. I love this joy.
Amazing.
Don't you love it?
I love it. I love it. And they're so beautiful. And every cover is just perfectly fitting for each of the themes. If you do sign up to get this free digital book, it does have articles all about C.S. Lewis's The Abolition of Man, which is a pivotal book philosophically. If you're thinking about especially modern, postmodern culture and reflecting on perhaps men or men of honor. How do we produce or create or get a man of honor? And he talks a lot about that. So I think in our culture today, for example, if you are like Carrie, a classical educator or an educator or a parent, you might particularly be interested in that Abolition of Man issue. So those articles are all about that book, which is all about the foundations of virtue. Here is the amazing cover of Joy. I just think it's so it is so joyful. Doesn't it look like just the leaves in the fall and just it's so verdant and green? And I think, don't you want to win this? You could win it. Like, again, joy in your mailbox. Who doesn't want that? So hashtag joy. So we still have Terry. Thank you, Terry, for being so fast in on this. But I do see a few other people who are in the comments. So go ahead and hashtag joy. And you might win this issue of an unexpected journal.
One thing I'll definitely say, and one thing I love about an unexpected journal, and Chris, I bet this resonates with you too, is that, man, we have such a creative team of people because, okay, I'm part of academia, but I know the stereotypes of academia, and it's boring, and academic journals are boring, and they're not super attractive. I mean, we don't sacrifice academic quality, but I think we make it look pretty good.
I mean, I think it's really fun too because it's people who do all sorts of things, but we're all thinking about some of the same things. And so if you like to think about philosophy and theology and literature and history and great works and great authors and the great conversation, then this is a journal for you.
Yes.
If you have people in your family who love thinking about those things, this is a journal for you. If you are someone who enjoys writing about those things in multiple forms, it could be fiction, it could be an essay, it could be in the form of poetry. We would love for you to look at our website, An Unexpected Journal, and look at the submissions page to check out the guidelines. And perhaps you too might find yourself on one of these launch parties one of these days. So if you are a writer and you're also interested, you want to pick up a copy of the journal, so you can see what kind of writing is in this journal, because you might want to also join us.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's really cool because one other detail I'd like to share is that it's really exciting for us, like I said, to get books into your hands. It's also really exciting for us to get books on bookshelves.
Yes.
We like to get them out there, and HJ Books. So HJ Books, a lot of people have heard of them. They're in Wichita. They've supported us. They stock our books on their shelves. So you could walk in there right now and get a copy of this most recent issue, and actually the 2 issues before that as well. So it's very, very cool to be able to do that. And I think we have to have a picture, right, of
Yeah, we should. Yeah,
of the books.
I was
Literally,
at the Society for Classical Learning this summer, which I think some other people were also at, because I also am a classical educator. And I walked past and I journal because I was shopping at the 8th Day Books display, and I just had to take a picture because it's so exciting. I think we are a perfect partnership. If you know an amazing bookstore that would be a perfect partnership for us, please let us know. You can email an Unexpected Journal and say, I have this fabulous library or bookstore in my area or at my church or at my school that really needs copies of this journal. There you go, .com. It's very simple, easy to remember. We would love for you to walk into your favorite bookstore and see an Unexpected Journal available to people there. So please let us know so that we can get an Unexpected Journal on your library and bookstore shelves.
And it's really cool. A few other fun details that you might not know about us, but we like to talk about them, is that an Unexpected Journal is at the Wade Center at Wheaton College. So if any of you are there, you can find it there. And one of our members, who you'll meet later, and in our donate, was in Oxford earlier this year. And she found an Unexpected Journal on the bookshelves at the Kilns, which was C.S. Lewis's house, which was so cool. It was a total fanboy moment there. I'm like, whoa.
Oh, yeah. So if you get that issue, which was, I think, the Planet Narnia issue, right? I have the same books on my bookshelf that are at the Kilns all the way over in England. So that's really exciting. I'm excited about our journal. I hope that you, if you are not already a reader, will become an enthusiastic reader of an Unexpected Journal. Oh, and I can see in our comments that we have more people putting in the hashtag joy. So if you're wanting to win, because I think we do that pretty soon here, right?
Very soon, yeah. You
got to get your hashtag in and tell your friends, get your hashtag in joy, hashtag joy, so you can win.
And it's really cool. Just one more thing before we go on. I think one of the coolest parts about an Unexpected Journal, well, okay, there are many cool parts, but one of the coolest parts is we're able to do events like this. We're able to talk to our authors. And Chris, you mentioned it earlier, but how many other possible ways could you imagine such a disparate group of people? So I'm in Vermont, Chris is in Texas, and we're from, I don't know, Carrie was from Arkansas.
Yeah.
We have people from all over the country, all over the world. And it's so exciting to be able to, it's virtual. I know it's not the same as in person, but it's awesome nonetheless.
I love it. I think it's fantastic. In my little 3rd grade class, we write a letter to a favorite author, and sometimes people get a letter back. But to have a live conversation where you could put your questions in and ask that author anything you'd like to know, whether it's their inspiration, their education, their future projects. I just think that's an amazing opportunity. So I'm super excited about all this being here today.
Yeah, well, I think it's about time to put up the giveaway. So let's Carla's helping out. So
Carla's doing our behind the scenes amazing magic work.
Yeah, she's the wizard of an Unexpected
Journal.
Journal.
Yes.
So here it comes, see it shows, and then it will randomly. I think there's only, wait, is there
Does
only
it
one?
show? Oh no, I
Two.
think these are the people that put their hashtag in, and then it's going to show who. How does it work, Carla?
It goes, it randomly goes back and forth, and I'll pop up winner in a second.
Okay, it'll say winner. All right, y'all, this is super fun, very suspenseful. Winner, Terry! Yay, Terry. So, Zach, she's supposed to email, right? She's going to
Correct.
email.
Please email me or email us your address, anunexpectedjournal@gmail.com. Just send your address so we can ship it to you, and I'll put that order in for you right away.
Awesome, Terry, yay. Joy, come into your mailbox.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. And I think, I mean, I don't know if I have a favorite issue, but this one's up pretty high. This is pretty
really
high on the favorites.
I enjoy the depth of the topics. Like, there's so many different ways to come at it. I think it's, I don't know, I think it's on the mind of people right now, and just kind of the way the world is going. And then I think it's one of those things that is elusive. You know, it's like, it's transcendental. So you, I think we'll always be looking for joy until we're completely reunited with the Lord and the fullness of Him and His glory, and human experience to be trying to understand what joy is and how do we find it.
Absolutely, so true. Well, I think it's about time to. Oh, we got a comment from Chicago. So, wait.
Yeah, that's from another writer at An Unexpected Journal.
Ted's awesome. I was messaging Ted the other day, brief story, and I think I called him like the Indiana Jones of apologetics or something.
Yeah, I think
he like it.
He is. I think he's pretty wonderful. I'm just gonna say.
Yeah. But yeah, so we wow, so we are off to another segment. So now wow, so I'm going to be interviewing Andy Crawford, Megan Riles, and Donald Williams. So we'll have a video. We'll be right back at you.
All right.
All right, well, hey everyone, welcome back to another segment of An Unexpected Journal launch party for our Joy issue. I'm Zach Schmal, your host for this segment, and I am joined by Megan Riles, Donald Williams, and Andy Crawford. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with me. Good afternoon.
Hey, Zach.
Hey.
Thanks for having us, Zach.
Hey, I love it. I love having all you here. This is so much fun for me, and I'd love maybe just to start, and we'll go in the order you're on my screen. So Megan, Andy, then Donald. If you could maybe introduce yourself briefly, and then tell the audience what you wrote about, just in case they haven't read it yet. Should have, but if they haven't, just so they know what we're about to talk about.
Okay, so my name is Megan Riles. I'm a research attorney, but in my spare time, I'm working on a master's in cultural apologetics from Houston Baptist University, which is now Houston Christian University with the new name change. And that's really where my true passion lies. I'm a board member for An Unexpected Journal, and I also serve as content editor for the Society for Women of Letters. My piece that I'm here to discuss today focuses on the connection between suffering and joy in the thought of C.S. Lewis. Our culture tends to assume that suffering and joy are diametrically opposed, when Lewis demonstrates that that is not, in fact, the case. I shared a little bit of my own personal experience of suffering along with my mom's in my piece. And what inspired it was seeing the really quite frankly, bad theologies of suffering out there in the church and among other Christians. What I have seen is that Christians often don't know how to think about suffering or how to understand why God allows it to happen and the relationship that suffering has to joy. So my brief summary of my article's position on how we should approach these issues is that Lewis advocates we must accept suffering to imitate Christ fully and receive true joy, and that God uses our individual sufferings to reveal a unique aspect of himself to us so that we will know better than other believers and continue to praise into eternity.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, it's an excellent article if you haven't read it yet. And Megan also wrote we're not really going to touch on it here, but a book recommendation in this issue. So check that out as well. Annie.
Hello, everyone. I am Annie Crawford, a classical educator and cultural apologist, and I teach great books and apologetics courses, as well as write and speak on those topics. I write and edit for an unexpected journal, and I'm a founding leader and resident scholar at Society for Women of Letters, which Megan also mentioned. So my article is really about my love of reading literature. Teaching literature for the past 5 years or so, I've read a lot of literary theory and have been working to develop a coherent Christian approach to literature that could guide my teaching and that I could offer my students for their own reading. And I realized the main question that literary theorists ask is, what is the source of the meaning of a text? Is it in the author's own life and culture? Is it in the text itself, as new critics like T.S. Eliot argue? Or is it in the reader? Is it the reader's own imaginative response that gives the text meaning? And it struck me teaching this that the answer really must be all three. And that implies this Trinitarian structure to literature, which, if you're familiar with Dorothy Sayers, she argues for in her book, The Mind of the Maker. And so seeing that triune pattern emerge from my teaching of literature really just gave me so much joy. You know, the joy that we have when we see God's ingenious design in his world, how beautifully ordered his creation is. So my article in this issue of An Unexpected Journal called Joy in the Mind of the Reader, it outlines this Trinitarian structure that I think underlines the art of both creating and reading literature, and I think explains why we have so much joy in reading.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I love it. And the article actually leads off our issue because we thought, it's great to set the framework for they're picking up a book to read it, and why do they love doing it so much? It's really helpful for framing, right, this entire issue of joy and why we derive joy from reading. So yeah, thank you, Annie. It's awesome. And Donald, last but not least, sir.
I suppose I'm best described as a border dweller, permanently camped out on the borders between pastoral ministry and serious scholarship, between theology and literature, between Narnia and Middle Earth. And I spent 32 years as the medieval and Renaissance guy in the English department at Toccoa Falls College. Also taught the apologetics course there and some theology. The small Christian college is the last refuge of the Renaissance man, or the Renaissance man wannabe, in my case. I'm professor emeritus now. I'm retired, and I still keep myself in as much mischief as I can, including writing for the Unexpected Journal. I was concerned from both a pastoral and a scholarly angle with two problems with a life of joy. A logical problem. I don't think we want to reduce joy to an emotion, but it certainly has an emotional component to it. And yet Scripture commands us, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. Well, how can you make an emotion a commandment? I mean, if you tell me I have to feel something, you pretty much guaranteed that's not going to happen. Emotions really exist most healthily and powerfully as a byproduct, a response to something else. And so you can't be joyful by saying, okay, I'm supposed to be joyful, so now I'm going to do it. It just doesn't work. And yet, clearly, Paul wasn't talking nonsense when he gave us that, but it kind of sounds like he is. Then there's that's the logical problem with joy. Then there's the existential problem, which is that God doesn't spare us as believers from participating in the ongoing sufferings of the world that result from the fall. We get diseases, we get in accidents, we have family problems that are just as much as the non-Christian has. We believe we get special resources for dealing with them from our connection to the true God and his Son, but we're certainly not exempted from them. There are good reasons for this. If God worked it out in his providence so that no Christian was ever in an automobile accident or an airplane wreck or came down with cancer or leukemia or something like, I mean, everybody would want to be a Christian, except nobody could be, because they'd all be doing it for the wrong reason. And they wouldn't really be exercising faith as the Bible understands it. I found some keys to both of those problems looking at the epistles of John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, where he uses three words, truth, joy, and love. Those three words just keep cycling back through those epistles and interacting with each other in interesting ways. And so I came up with a formula. What is joy? Joy is the emotional residue that's left behind by the dynamic of indwelling truth and outworking love. And so the Christian life is about walking in the truth, and truth is what is so. Truth is what is wholesome and alive and wonderful, and ultimately is embodied in the person of Jesus Christ, who is the way, the truth, and the life. When that lives in you, when that dynamic is living in us, its natural byproduct is indwelling truth leads to outworking love. That's how you can tell if the person really has the dynamic of indwelling truth, because it's not just that he spouts correct propositions, but genuinely speaking the truth in love, acting the truth in love, is what shows you that you've got not just the ideas, but the actual reality of the person, Jesus Christ, who is the truth, dwelling in you. And when that's happening, joy is the emotional byproduct of that process. And if you try to get happiness or good luck or pleasant experiences any other way, you may get them, but it won't really be what the Bible means by joy. And so how is this the answer to the problems? Well, that dynamic is something that runs right through all the difficulties of life, transforms them by making us better able to handle them, and it takes us to a place where we are living the reality of the truth that the Christian life talks about. The Bible describes joy, it's already been mentioned, as one of the fruit of the Spirit. And I think this whole concept, the whole metaphor of fruit, is part of the key. How Paul can command us to be joyful when joy is an emotion. So I say, okay, produce apples. Well, you can't. There's nothing you can do to make an apple. But that doesn't mean there's nothing you can do. You could plant an apple tree. Give me some eggs. Well, you can't produce eggs. Actually, a couple of us can, but not the kind we're looking for in this context. You can't do that. But you can raise chickens. You can get some chickens. You can build them a good chicken coop, and you can provide them with good care and nourishment, and you can check their nest every day. And that's how you get eggs. And so when Paul tells us, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice, he's telling us to raise chickens. And the chickens he's telling us to raise are truth, indwelling truth, and outworking love. And I think if you reflect back on your own life experiences, you'll discover that insofar as that process, that dynamic is a reality in your life, you've been a joyful person.
Donald, I love what you're saying there, and it reminds me of Elijah in the Old Testament, who he can't make the fire himself, right? But he prepares the altar. He prepares the context in which
he builds the altar so the fire can fall, which he can't produce himself.
Yeah, definitely. It's so.
I think Annie just got frozen by the internet, so I wasn't actually being rude to.
Oh man! Well, no, this is a great start, and hopefully her computer will unfreeze momentarily. But I think, and Donald, you had to show the theological backing of yours, amazing. I'd love to give you that chance too, to expand on the and Annie too, the theological background of your argument, because all of you, I mean, we hold this segment glorious joy, because all of yours are pretty theological takes, pointing to the glory of God, and how that relates to. I mean, is there any? Well, this is probably a very leading question, but is there any other way to joy outside of God? So, but maybe Mayhem, maybe you can kind of dive into some of the theological underpinnings to follow what Donald just said, and then Annie, you're up next too about that.
Yeah, so I think it's certainly possible to find a partial way to joy outside God. As we're fond of saying in my master's apologetics program, all truth is God's truth. So it's definitely possible for non-believers to start barking up the right tree, so to speak, and find a way to partial joy when they live in accordance with the moral law of the cosmos that Lewis called the dance of self-giving. Because that itself is an imitation of Christ and his selfless example. And on a slightly different note, non-believers can, of course, experience a longing for God. As I discuss in my article, Lewis himself felt this longing, and he called it Sehnsucht, the German word for longing, and he identified it as joy. As a side note, in my piece, I also discuss exactly what it was about God that Lewis thought the object of Sehnsucht was, which was interesting for me to write because he tends to be a little vague about it. And I think I've been able to identify exactly what he was talking about. But to get back to the original question, I think the fullest expression of joy ultimately can't be found outside God, outside Christ, because as Lewis says when he compares the Trinity to a water fountain, you have to jump into the water to get wet. And in the same way, you have to participate in the Trinity by knowing Christ. And once we have salvation by knowing Jesus, we will then also know the one unique aspect of God that we are meant to start praising now and praise into eternity. That is true joy. That's the object of the longing of Sehnsucht. That's what Lewis thinks the pearl of great price from the Gospels is. And we must know God first in order to find that our way to that joy, because it's the only way to have that individual knowledge of God and therefore be able to communicate it to others.
That's awesome. I love that. And I love how you tied in, Lewis's thoughts so tightly. That's so it's so compelling to see Lewis break that down and work through that himself, and then you apply it to your own life situation and your story, and it's excellent. It's great. Now, Annie, you are now unfrozen, so welcome back.
Thanks. Sorry about that.
No problem.
unfortunately, I'm in a hotel today, so seems like the Wi-Fi is a little unreliable. But so to pick up on what Megan was saying, I was thinking about this, and it's important, Donald, as you did, to distinguish between, I would say, pleasure, which I think is physical and comes from external stimuli, right? And in that way, we can control. I know different ways to push the physical wiring of my body, to push those buttons that might make endorphins. Or I think if we think of pleasure as something physical, but joy is something spiritual. Joy is something that comes from the inside out, whereas pleasure maybe could come from the external stimuli. Joy is something that comes from the spiritual realm, from the inside. And kind of I'm getting to your question, Zach, about is it possible, for the unbeliever? And this is what I find fascinating about Aristotle and his idea of eudaimonia, this idea of flourishing, which is getting at something spiritual, right? Because it's something more than pleasure. It's this concept of the flourishing soul, the person who from the inside out is acting in accordance with their purpose. And I think that's close to joy. It's something from the inside out. But I think like one step further, I want to take it is that distinction between general revelation and special revelation. So the Aristotle's idea through general revelation, through God's general grace in the world, that as we live from the inside out in accordance with his ways, we move toward joy, we move toward his presence. But really to have that fullness of joy, which I think is to participate in the triune life of God. We only gain that full access through Christ, through that special revelation. So that's how I think we can have tastes, glimpses of a kind of joy through that general grace, but it's not the fullness which we're really longing for. And that's why I think so often we experience it as a longing, this desire to move further up and further in till one day we're part of that full triune communion as we were made to be.
Yeah, I think that Annie and Megan are both spot on. The concept of eudaimonia, the unimpeded pursuit of virtue, which is Aristotle's concept of happiness, it's tapping into part of that dynamic of indwelling truth and outworking love coming from the inside out. And I love that Megan referenced that passage where Lewis uses the metaphor of a fountain to describe the Trinity. The Trinity is this unstoppable fountain of life and love and joy and everything that's good, just irrepressibly bubbling up. And if you want to experience the fullness of it, you've got to dive into the middle of it. So if you get close, like Aristotle does with eudaimonia, you get a little bit of the spray that can entice you to come further in, but only by being invited into the dance of the love in the Trinity, with the only access to that being through Christ himself. Only thus can you actually dive into the fountain and achieve the fullness of it. So these two ladies have gotten together and I think laid out the path about as well as I've ever heard it done.
It was great. And oh man, I love this. And I'm curious. Okay, I love what you all are saying, and that it's been kind of alluded to. I know Carice and I have kind of talked about it during the intermissions, that, it doesn't always feel joyful out there, right? Life doesn't always feel joyful. And Donald, you talked about that. I mean, Annie, and you've talked about that. And now you all are talking about the Trinity and this triune relationship between joy, truth, and love. But those elements feel very fragmented right now. And so I'm wondering, I'm wondering if maybe you have, how do we help people realize that, okay, until you love someone, until you actually hear about them and love them, you know, y your joy is gonna be incomplete. How do we help people realize this? Because I feel like they're missing it, but what do we do about that? So maybe let's start with, oh, nice, Richard, nice, another HCU. I did it right that time. First time I've done it right today. But yeah,
So the Baptists have become Christians now?
I know, isn't that crazy?
Who knew?
I mean, my only complaint about it is that I have to buy a new polo shirt. I mean, come on, I have to find one now. But let's start with Andy on this. Like, how do we help solve this fragmentation? Because I mean, we're talking about it, and you all are spot on. But how do we help people realize that? Does anybody? Maybe Andy, do you want to start? I'll start with you, I guess. I don't know.
Yes. So this is a hard question, but the verse that always comes to mind is Colossians, that beautiful passage in Colossians where Paul is describing Christ, through whom all things were created in heaven and earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And, so I teach great books, and I teach the sweep of, intellectual history. And you very much see that in the modern era, the medieval world and when Jerusalem met Athens, right, we formed this logocentric understanding of the world. And this is where you get this medieval synthesis and all things intricately ordered into a coherent understanding of the world. And in the modern era, you see that unraveling, right? And that's why we experience so much fragmentation that you're talking about. And a lot of stuff doesn't even make sense. And, there's no easy answers, but I do think this is why I'm so passionate about the discipline of cultural apologetics, the work of seeing again a logocentric view of reality, how in him all things hold together. So to return to Tertullian's challenge, what has Athens to do with Jerusalem? Everything. The Christ, so this is what I'm doing, I think, in the field of literature and hoping to do with my article is the study of literature is all fragmented, the critical theory, which critical theory are you going to pick apart the text with, right? And we march out all these various fragmented theories into academic war. How can I return to a logocentric understanding of literature in my discipline? How can I begin to religament, which is what religion is, right? Religament the world together to show the connections, how all things in Christ find their proper place, find their proper ordering. So, just one answer I think is better Christian education, to dig in and do that work. To not abandon the academy, to not abandon education, but to take up Tertullian's challenge again, as the church fathers did, and show how things are connected in Christ.
I love that. And I definitely have Megan and Donald to quick word on this. I heavily wrote at a time. I love talking to you people. I say that every segment. But Megan, what do you got? I mean, how do we help solve this fragmentation or help it? Maybe not solve it, but help it.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Annie just said about the modern world being so fragmented and joy, truth, and love, therefore not holding together like they did for cultures past. And I 100% agree that Christ is the answer. We see joy, truth, and love united in his sacrifice for us on the cross and in his resurrection. So my answer to this question is that we find joy, truth, and love united again in suffering. We're called to imitate Christ, and he is the suffering servant. So for me, I think my answer to this is to say we need to develop a more robust theology of suffering in the church. I mentioned previously, I've heard and in fact been subject to some very, very bad theologies of suffering. And I'm just going to mention a couple briefly. One is that God somehow actively inflicts suffering on us and wants us to suffer. Another, the one I've been subject to and that I think is the cruelest, is that, well, because I have a certain health condition, I've committed a great sin for which God is punishing me. Like I said, that's definitely the cruelest one. And the last one I've heard is that God really doesn't pay much attention to suffering, and it's just something we need to work through on our own. In my very strong opinion, none of those are correct. Suffering, and I discussed this in my article, suffering is an unavoidable consequence of a fallen world, but it's one Jesus embraced in order to reorganize and redeem the world from sin. He came to suffer for us and with us. And that's where we see joy, truth, and love united again. So the proper view of suffering is to regard it as a necessary evil, and a tool that God uses, not one that he creates, in order to make us more Christ-like. And we in the church really need to develop a more robust theology of suffering around that.
To me, the key that pulls us all together is the standard proof text for apologetics, 1 Peter 3:15, because nobody ever reads it in context. It says, always be ready to make a defense to anyone who asks reason for the hope. Why are people asking this? Why are people asking you for this reason for the hope that's within you? Because the whole context leading into and out of that verse is suffering and persecution. You're being mistreated for your faith, and yet you're not responding the way people expect. We're being mean to you, and you respond not with vindictiveness or defensiveness, but with love. Why are you doing that? What is the matter with you? And if we were living the life of indwelling truth and outworking love, so that people could actually see it, that's the context in which the whole apologetics thing arises. So, to me, the thing that pulls us all together is to understand 1 Peter 3:15 in context and to realize that this isn't just an academic pursuit. These apologetics questions should be coming up as a result of the fact that we're living a life of love, truth, and joy, and people don't get it because that's not the normal way that people should respond to what's happening to us. So the opportunity there is to make apologetics not just an abstract philosophical discussion or an argument or a debate, but make apologetics the explanation of why this higher level of living, this life that is life and life more abundantly, this life that captures the essence of the one who is the way, the truth, and the life, is really possible, and point people to Jesus Christ, and then deal with all the issues that may come up as they come up. But this whole concept of joy then becomes the key to apologetics. Yeah. And I think once we get into that dynamic, things are going to go a whole lot differently than they have in the church.
That's amazing. And I can't believe we're already out of time. All right, so really one real quick second. Where can people learn more about you really quickly? Like literally, I'm already bleeding into the next time. So Annie, where can we find more about you?
You can find me at anniecrawford.net or on Facebook or Instagram.
Yes. And Megan, what about you?
I don't have a website, but I do have an author page at An Unexpected Journal with my pieces. And I'm also under the Leadership Council tab on the Society for Women of Letters website.
Nice. And yeah, you've written some awesome articles for us.
Yeah.
And Donald, how about you?
My
sir?
website is www.donaldtwilliams.com. One word, and you don't need the capital letters or the extra period after T that's on the screen.
Sorry.
Just www.donaldtwilliams1word.com is the website. I also blog at the 5pilgrimsoneword.com. So you can look for my stuff there.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. This was an awesome segment. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun for me. And so thank you for being a part of it with us.
Can we say our pleasure, even if this is not an official Chick-fil-A
Oh, man, now you make me want Chick-fil-A. All right. So Harris is going to be back with Jasmine Biggs and Sonia Howard momentarily. Right, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Live long.
Hey, everybody, and
Hello.
welcome back to our session 4, and this is called Joy from the Ashes. And I'm Carice Gilliland, and I'm joined by Sonia Howard and Jasmine Biggs. And I'm just going to give them a chance to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves. So, Sonia, if you would go first.
Sure. G'day from Australia. My name's Sonia Howard. I'm a mother of 4 beautiful children, one whose residence is with the Lord, and I'm a wife of 24 years of a darling, robust, very masculine husband. And but my true identity is steeped in Christ, and my beloved is mine and I am his.
I love it. I love that you're writing for us in this issue. I believe it's the first time that you have written for an Unexpected Journal. Would that be right?
Yes, that's right. And it was a strange, unexpected, and fortuitous account that I came to be aware of you. I teach in a Christian college in Australia, and the college actually uses the Unexpected Journal as a vehicle to teach senior secondary students, 17, 18-year-olds, how to craft Christian argument, and beautiful literary responses in their text. So,
oh my goodness, I love that. What an amazing story. That just warms my heart. I love it.
Delightful.
Yeah, the Lord works in mysterious ways from continent to continent. Jasmine, will you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us some about you.
Hi. Yeah. So I'm Jasmine, and I am one class away from a Master's of Arts in Apologetics at Houston Christian University.
Right.
The new name. And I love apologetics. My dad came to faith from atheism through apologetics in college. Grew up in an atheist home, but got invited to Bible study one night by some girls. And he's like, cute girls, French, cute girls, French homework, So he went to Bible study, and they handed him Josh McDowell and C.S. Lewis and said, look at the evidence for the resurrection. He took a couple of months to do that and became a Christian, just based on the evidence. And so that's part of my legacy and my story. And then I, grew up in the faith, but came out of a lot of legalism and kind of harmful things in high school. And so apologetics is what helped me to cling to my faith as I'm like trying to keep the baby while throwing out the bathwater.
Yeah.
Right? And so, which so many of my friends were not able to do. So I feel like a survivor in some respects. But apologetics is a very personal significance for me. And also like stories like Chronicles of Narnia and Beatrix Potter and others throughout my upbringing really, I think, highlighted the beauty and the goodness of the faith, and not just the truth of it, and also helped me to walk with Jesus throughout a lot of difficult things. And so yeah, I love apologetics. I love the cultural apologetics angle that I'm in, and what the Unexpected Journal stands for all of that. And so it's a joy to be part of this.
Well, we're happy to have you here too, and congrats on being one class away. You're so close.
So close.
So close. Although every class feels like a victory, I think, as you get through it. In the last session, Megan had talked about suffering and Christian theology of suffering and grief. And I think a lot of times when we think about happier things, things that you would more relate or lean towards happiness, but we don't always think about joy in the midst of grief, especially really intense grief. And both of your articles dealt with that. Jasmine, your book review is about, I believe I'm going to get this correct, is about a father who lost. And then Sonia, yours piece it's so beautiful and personal, and it's about your own loss. And I give you each a chance to just talk about that. Talk about what you wrote about, why you chose to write it, and especially this particular kind of grief and suffering, because it is, I think, one of the most difficult, because it's an out of order feeling, right? And people do not always know, how am I supposed to find any joy after the grief that honestly you don't really get rid of, right? You always miss that person. You always wish for that person. But I wanted to give you each a chance. Jasmine, if you'll start and just tell a little about the book. I believe you did a review for the book. There it is. And you can tell a little about that and kind of give our audience a heads up on what's the story and why did you choose to talk about that in an issue about joy?
Yeah. So if you've been watching this whole live stream, you'll know that Lewis talks about joy as he defines it as this sort of longing, this pang of just this exquisite. You encounter something exquisite, like a mountain range or a sunset or the stars, in the wilderness when there's no street light pollution, and you're just hit with this pang of like, it's pain, but you want it, right? It's this sense of joy that just like makes you ache for something more. And so I think that Lewis's definition of joy in that sense is it's not necessarily cheerful happiness so much as it is this it feels like the truest sorrow and joy and longing all in one package that you've ever experienced. And so I think that this book really evoked that for me as I'm reading through it. And the author, who was a classmate of mine in one of my classes, he and his wife suffered a miscarriage of their son. And so he tells the story of him and his, future 6-year-old son, if his son had been born, right, on a fishing trip in the mountains. And I just wanted to show, like, just the illustrations are really beautiful. And I think that's important for, you're not just presenting truth, you're presenting truth with goodness and with beauty. And I think Richard just really imbues the story with this sense of beauty and longing. Like, you're longing for our hope fulfilled and Christ with us, and the metaphors that he uses in the story really, I think, capture certain key principles of scripture and certain pieces of theology that sometimes we miss. So I found myself edified, even though it's a children's book. Like, some of the Lewis says that the best, that the children's literature is only good children's literature if it's worth reading as adults.
Yeah, if you go back to it again, right?
Right. Yeah. And so I really appreciated the imagery that he uses to kind of communicate these timeless truths.
Yeah, and that's it's a fictional representation of his own story. So he kind of took it, not completely fictional, but obviously with that loss, he wasn't on that trip, but he imagines, using his imagination, how that would be. Sonia, I would love for you to tell our audience your own story and just share that with us as much as you time that we have. I would love to hear that from you.
Sure. So I've had a strange life, frankly. It's not the life I anticipated, and I think in my infancy in Christianity, in my early Christianity, I anticipated that if we made a range of certain life choices, that the logical arrival point would be a life of ease and comfort in Christ. And of course, as we move from that infant milk into the meat that our soul truly needs, we discover that the Christian walk is to emulate Christ. And he is a God who was fully human and knew phenomenal suffering. And that suffering in a small, refracted way is something that I have come to know. So on the most horrendous morning of my life, September 12, 2011, I walked into my little boy's room to wake him up for school and discovered my 10-year-old dead, riddled with rigor mortis. And it was horrifying. And a doctor had 3 months earlier told me my son was healthy. My medical knowledge extends to just a simple first aid certificate. And I thought I had seen the symptoms of a stroke. So we do a first aid certificate even as English literature teachers. And I'd seen symptoms of a stroke. So I rushed him to the local ER from our mountains home. But by the time we arrived at the ER, he was fully recovered. And so it looked like I was just bringing a robust little boy into a hospital room. And I appeared to be a hypervigilant parent, unfortunately. So they ran some tests, and one of them was a cardiac screen, which is an echocardiogram. And unfortunately, during the consult, the physician took phone calls about his bathroom renovation and wasn't focused on the screen. And I remember a moment in there of feeling horror, even in there, while the physician's telling me everything I wanted to hear as a parent. He's okay. He actually said, he's a little fat. And so it was a bit offensive. But then we walked out of there, and I had that moment of horror, which I now, in retrospect, understand it was actually the Holy Spirit telling me there is something really hard to come here.
Right.
So a handful of weeks later, that's what I found. And the horror continued. In our country, they're allowed to desecrate the body in an act they put medical terminology around called autopsy. And so without my knowledge or consent, they conducted that practice on my child and desecrated what is holy, which is the human body. And they ravaged my hope. Because I travelled down to the morgue, and I thought that I could pray over him and I would have a Lazarus story. But instead, I was told that they had removed my son's brain. And I looked at this little boy, flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. And I knew that he was not coming back to me. And then as the horror continued to unfurl, I begged God to understand why. And he said to draw the people to me. And that is what happened. People came. They started to consider their own mortality. If a 10-year-old can just suddenly die in the night, well, this is something that we need to contemplate. And I asked how. And that's my house was declared a crime zone. So I've gone from a housewife and a mummy and a literary teacher to this horror. And I had to find logic in that space. I had to somehow grasp at these things that were so compromised in that time. And I went back to that space that where he had that cardiac assessment, and I thought, okay, I need to contact the hospital because that's recorded. It's supposed to be archived, that assessment, for 35 years. And that's the standard practice in my country. And I contacted the hospital and I got a written response saying, "Oh, we're terribly sorry, Mrs. Howard. We've accidentally deleted that."
No.
And that's where I began to understand. And then the pathologist who conducted the autopsy also failed to take a key cardiac measurement. So I've listened to your remarkable academics, and that was the trajectory that I thought my life would take too. I desperately wanted to study. I desperately love literature, but I actually ended up investing a very significant portion of my life in a desperate pursuit for justice for my child, because it's a human rights violation to have a lie on a death certificate, and the pen means something to me. Absolutely. And so when they wrote unknown on my child's death certificate, it was a devastating violation. When they told me behind closed doors that he had a cardiac condition and that the things that I needed to do to protect my other living children, but then in the public arena on the national media said, "Oh, we don't know." And the deletion of clinical records is of no consequence. And so it was like being stuck in this strange alternate reality. All of my understandings of how the world worked were completely shattered. And I saw the deception of man and the drivers of self-protection and the tremendous wickedness that I knew was out in the world, but somehow on the periphery of my very comfortable domestic life. But in that space, returning to joy, was my only strength, was to cleave to the truths that I knew, that I had ruminated in as a child, that I had ruminated in my youth. The joy of the Lord was my strength. It was the only way I was going to hold on to my sanity, to know that despite all of the faithfulness of man, all of his systems, all of his justice, they were dimly lit, they were shallow constructs and fraught with disaster. And the only way that I was going to see my way through this wreckage, through the despair and destruction of seeing the desecration of my child, was to cleave to the joy of the Lord, and he was my strength. And I've listened to some of your earlier speakers in the segment talking about that joy is not something to be manufactured. Well, in fact, for me, I had to be quite defiant and deliberate and manufacture that joy in my own psychological framework, constantly going back to verses that I knew to be true, even though I was being pummeled. My beloved is mine and I am his, and he will hold to me, he will cleave to me, he is the lover of my soul. And while others are letting go of me, while others would not stand with me or fight with me or truth tell, he would hold me. And it's been 11 years now. And during those times where God was in the shout, yes, he's a whisper, but in the grief, he was very audible to me in those very profoundly grievous times. He told me it would take 12 years to bring truth to fruition. And so, we're now in that last 12-month space, and I trust him, and I know he will bring truth, and that is the only space that I can find joy. This has to be set right. It must be set right, and there is joy in that knowledge, and there is hope in that knowledge.
I just want to say thank you for sharing your story, and that we'll all be praying for that. Yeah, absolutely.
Sonia.
I was going to say, I'm sorry, Jasmine, I'm sorry. I'm going to say I love, you said a phraseology that I thought was really wonderful, and it was a defiant joy. And I love that, because sometimes you do, right? You just have to look all the suffering in the face and say, I'm still going to find, I'm still going to embrace, I'm still going to cooperate with the joy of the Lord in this really hard space, because I know he has not forgotten me. Yeah. Jasmine, did you have a question or a comment?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to say that along those same lines, I just finished a book by Joy Clarkson entitled Aggressively Happy. And in there, she quotes this quote that I can't recall the who it's from, but it says that to to be happy though you have considered all the facts, or something to that effect. And I appreciate that sort of the defiant joy, that aggressively happy. I'm going to cling to this, even though the whole world is telling me I should be miserable right now.
And to the truth, because the truth is that there will be justice at some point. I don't know when, but we know that God promises us a redeemed world. So we know that it's not always going to be, we won't sit in this injustice forever. And I know in your piece, Sonia, that you had a combination of prose and poetry, and I thought it was so beautiful. I was interested in your thoughts on poetry as a vehicle for grief versus prose as a for joy. And I was just interested in your ideas about that. As a writer, what would you say about those two forms and how they could be used to express grief and joy?
Oh, I think that's a beautiful question. Poetry was actually a vehicle for healing for me. It seems to be more fluent for me. It's cathartic, I suppose. So I think that there's a reason that God invites us to worship through song, because it engages so many senses, our spirit, our voice, our soul, our cognition. And similarly, poetry connects those spaces as well. So yeah, I have found poetry deeply cathartic and deeply healing. And the free flow, when you operate outside of the typical literary conventions, there's something freeing in that, and you can connect soul to soul and with what you need to say, and God hears. I love prose as well, but there's literary rules around that, and sometimes that can be prescriptive, but rules are useful as well.
Right. We all know, like, you have to have them, know them before you can break them, right?
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that poetry as a vehicle for grief is also helpful, because grief is not linear, right? It doesn't travel in this really neat line. It doesn't go in this really neat package. You don't have this day and then you suddenly are okay, like that. It just doesn't work like that. Grief can smack you out of nowhere, right? But joy can smack you out of nowhere too. And I think in times of intense grief and suffering, God, I have seen him deliver very unusual pieces of joy. And some of it has been through poetry. So I think as a vehicle, it's a nice constrained little package that lets us say things that we really can't say with all the words we would use in prose. You know, it sometimes doesn't work like that. So, Jasmine, did you have any thoughts on the genres of like poetry and prose, and talking about either joy or suffering?
Yeah, I think one line that I really love, it's a famous line from Emily Dickinson, says, "Tell the truth, but tell it slant. Truth in circuit lies." And I think there's some real truth to that, of how it's not just about, and going back to truth, goodness, and beauty, it's not just about checking the boxes of knowing the right information, right? Otherwise, the Bible would just be like an instruction manual. Like, do this, A, B, C, D, E, and that's all you need. But no, the Bible is full of poetry. It's full of prose. It's full of history and apocalyptic literature. You have all these different forms of writing. And I think when you marry truth with beauty, which is what you get kind of in this really condensed form in poetry, it, as the kids say, it hits different. But yeah, that sense of encountering truth in this captivating way that's really beautiful, and draws you in and it makes you desire it. Like God is not just the ultimate truth. He's also the ultimate beauty, the ultimate goodness, and he's the most attractive thing and the most desirable thing that you can possibly encounter. And so when you, I think when you realize that, like the second part of your Christian walk begins, personally, like it's not just, oh, I checked a box once, I believe the right things. It's also about, what does my heart desire? What do I long for? Our hearts are restless until they rest in the Lord, as St. Augustine says. And so I think that while prose is valuable in how it can present a lot of information, poetry is valuable insofar that it can really make that information memorable and beautiful and striking.
And I think too that poetry hides its secrets. It's kind of like the TARDIS. If you ever watch Doctor Who, right, it's like bigger on the inside. So if you're writing a poem, a person reads 6 words and they see the 6 words, but inside that 6 words, you can say a lot of things. And I think because grief is so hard and suffering is hard, and like you were saying, Sonia, earlier, I think initially in our Christian walk, we think sometimes, whether we think it consciously or unconsciously, we know we think it because we're surprised when something happens, right? Like we think like, oh, this is the way my life is going to go. And then it doesn't go that way. And we're surprised by that, whatever that is. And I think, the beauty of poetry as a vehicle for that is that it almost has the better surprise inside of it. So you can kind of reverse that negative surprise and put things, truth and goodness in it that people in their grief probably couldn't hear altogether. Y'all, I cannot believe it. I just looked at the time and we have like a minute. So Sonia, please tell us like where people can find you, where they can find your work and your writing, so we can stay in touch with you and your beautiful family.
Thank you. Well, it's been a privilege to share my story with you. Thank you for giving me a space to do so. So I'm at Linktree. Sojourner Freehow is my pen name. And there's more to come. And I hope to have further interactions with your amazing journal. It's spectacular. And I feel like I've found my people.
Yes, that's what we all say too. We're like, it's our people. So we're happy you're one of the people. Please keep being one of the people. We love having you. All right, Jasmine, where can we find you? Where do you write?
Right now, you can find me on Facebook.
I know.
But I tend to try to make my Facebook almost a blog a little bit, or I'll share more like reflections and things than personal stuff.
Well, and we can find you in an unexpected journal too, right?
Yes. So I just started writing I started writing for Unexpected Journal. I became a board member recently, and so I'm hoping to, as I finish my degree and have a little more bandwidth, I'm hoping to write more for the journal.
Yes.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. Well, y'all, thank you so much for being here today. It's been so incredible and such a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, we're back for another giveaway. So I just wanted to say before we start, the Lord has brought all these people together. I love the courage He's giving people to share their stories with other people so that they can be edified and uplifted and encouraged in their own grief and in their own suffering. And I hope that if you're listening today, you'll pick up a copy of an Unexpected Journal so that you too can be encouraged by their beautiful essays and poetry. I can't say enough about the work of the Lord in this and how grateful and thankful I am. And as Sonia said, like, these are your people. Okay, you found your people. So come on.
I love that line.
I know. I love it. I love it. That might be my favorite line today.
Well, because it's such an interesting thing when you think about it, because I think a lot of times, I mean, cultural apologetics is a growing field, right? It's definitely a developing field. And it really started, gaining momentum probably. It's been around, obviously, for far longer than that, but as far as a kind of well-known term, probably 10 years, maybe?
I think, yeah. I mean, I would, in terms of like burgeoning popularity and as a, in that phraseology, I would probably say that. I'm sure there's somebody who's been doing it longer who would say otherwise.
But it's one of those things that it's all of the people like us who've been like, I didn't know what to call it. I didn't know where to go. I mean, there's a master's degree program in that. I didn't even know about that.
Exactly. Or like when I found the program, I was one of the very first students. So like when it very first started, I took the very first class and I said, this is the master's program I've been looking for, but couldn't articulate for like 15 years or 10 years. I don't know. That's exaggerative. Probably 10 years. a while. And she said, oh, I'm so glad to hear that. And then as we've gone through, we have this journal and we have all these other Society for Women of Letters and all of these ways that people are connecting. I just see the Lord moving in that. And I'm just praise him for that and thank him for that. And I don't know. It's exciting. Y'all want to be a part of this. So come on, get your hashtag in so you can win this issue. It's hashtag, we're still hashtag joy, right, Zach?
You're correct.
Yeah, we're still
hashtag joy. When we do that randomization again, our previous winner will still be in there, but sorry, you can't win twice.
If you are, that's enough joy for you in your mailbox.
Yeah, you have enough joy. We have to like share the joy. So, hashtag joy, totally. And it is really interesting. Like you, I was a very early student. I was fully online because I live in Vermont. And I knew I wanted to be involved in apologetics. My senior year of my undergraduate, I had a friend who, asked me some very tough questions about my faith. And I've been a Christian my whole life, but I didn't know. I hadn't been trained in that. And so I thought, well, I need to know more. And I need structure. I need someone to tell me, read this, read this, read this.
Yes.
Because otherwise, I buy a pile of books that I never read, which is my now postgraduate problem. I have more books than I had ever hoped to read. And so, but you have that situation. And so, anyway, I was very grateful to have like-minded people to come alongside. And I mean, that, and like you said earlier, Chris, I mean, man, this journal literally started on a Facebook post. I mean, it was literally a post, and you and I were talking.
You and I were having this conversation, and we were like, why isn't there one of these?
Yeah, and because at the time, I mean, I don't know how you felt, but I know I felt, I'm like, man, I want to talk about this stuff, but where do I talk about it? What am I going to do?
Yes, we had these things we had written, and we said, where do we submit these? And everyone just kind of went, well, there's kind of this one that sort of does this, and there's kind of this one that sort of does that, but nobody's really doing. We were like, well, okay, we think maybe the Lord might be calling us to do this, so let's get it done. Like, so exciting. I love it. And he's been so good to us and given us all the people we need and the resources and delivered us from crazy computer issues. And, he's amazing and always right on time. So
100%.
We're so thankful. So thankful.
And one more thing I do want to mention, just because, again, everything that you read online is free. You can read anything we have. It's all there free. If you do want an unexpected journal in your mailbox, let me just encourage you. Okay, if you don't live in Wichita and you're not going to buy the 8-day books, because that's number one. But number two, I love independent bookstores. So any of y'all out there, but if you know you want to buy it, you want to save money, let me recommend an annual subscription. We do it cheaper than if you buy each one individually on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever you buy books. So just wanted to throw that out there because, I mean, obviously we don't want cost to be a barrier to our content. We provide it for free anyway. But if, you know, a lot of you people out there are probably book people. A lot of our journal people are hard copy book people. I remember we started purely online, and all of our readers were like, "Well, yeah, but where's the book? But where's the book?"
Where's
And I'm
the
like,
book?
"Oh,
Yeah.
all right, so we'll do that."
And what a joy to get that in your mailbox. And at 50% off, you could buy one for yourself and one for a friend.
Oh,
So
there
if
you
you were
go.
planning on spending that money anyway, you might as well buy 2 sets and give a set as a gift. So
Yeah, no,
that's
no,
another way to have more. But 50% off is really good, but you can read it online for free. I also want to shout out to educators and professors. If you have students who are researching this kind of stuff, I work at a classical Christian school, and we've had seniors use it in their senior thesis project. I've had people give articles from an unexpected journal to shared with the other faculty and staff. We've also shared them with parents, shared them on our school website. So we would love to be that resource for you. So please direct your teachers and your professors to our website, because we have a lot of articles on a lot of different topics, everything from philosophy to literature to virtue to education itself. So I think it's an amazing resource, and it doesn't cost you anything.
100%. And it's really, I love when we were thinking, now we've had a contributor from Australia. So we've had a contributor from 5 of the 7 continents. And if you don't know, if I'm assuming no one will send one from Antarctica. So I mean,
if someone goes to Antarctica, if like maybe Ted Wright, he might go to Antarctica. If he goes to Antarctica, he could take a book.
if any one of our contributors is going to Antarctica, it will be Ted. It will be Ted. It'll be awesome. I mean, I really think it's so interesting. I want to follow up with Sonia because, I mean, she found this at a college that was assigning our own. Like, what? I want to know all about
That's amazing. Amazing. Yes.
You think, like, I mean, I know, like, being the managing editor, and then all this awesome stuff happens, and I'm like, I didn't even know that. That's so cool.
I love it. And I feel like that it's the kind of thing that God keeps secret till just the right time, right? It's like when you need encouragement, or we're thinking like, oh, who should we be thinking about for an audience? And then the Lord says, oh, as it turns out, people are using the journal even in Australia. So I think that is such an encouragement, and I'm really excited. We would love to get copies of this in your hands. We would love for you to give our website send the link to someone so they can also read about an unexpected journal. Or if there are certain sessions of this watch party about which you were really interested, or you're discussing in a class, you could even show that segment in your class or use it as a springboard to talk about certain topics. And I think we have so many interesting topics and different streams of expertise coming in. I feel like it has such a wide appeal that anyone could really use it. So I would think about that too. If there's a session of this that has really resonated with you, to share that with the people around you.
And that is part of, I mean, really one of our chief missions is that, I mean, apologetics is really, I mean, all Christians should engage in apologetics, but not all Christians are philosophers. And for a long time in the field of apologetics, if apologetics was the realm of a lot of more formal philosophy. Now, I know
Mhm.
we're all technically philosophers because we have a way of thinking about the world and thinking,
Right.
but in the formal sense. And I
Yes.
don't mean to diminish that at all. I love
No.
that stuff, and it's valuable and good and excellent. But for some people, that's not the way they think. That's not the way they process. But we're still, I mean, Donald Williams mentioned that earlier. I mean, the great verse of apologetics that he rightfully said we should talk about in context. But having a reason, I mean, none of us are off the hook for that. If
No.
if formal philosophy isn't your thing, you still have to have a reason, and you still have to talk about it. Apologetics is for everyone, and I hope in a
Mhm.
in a little way, maybe we can help show that and encourage people, so that we can all be more faithful witnesses.
And I think Unexpected Journal is for everyone.
Yes.
There's something for everyone, and either by theme of issue or by what's in the issue. That's the thing that I think I really love about it is we do have people who are thinking in this very formal, what you would probably classify as academic
Mhm.
way, and then we have people who are thinking about things that people don't normally make connections with, music and films and themes and culture, but that everyone is talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I love that about our journal because I think it's both reason and imagination.
Mhm. Oh, man. Well, I think we better do this giveaway because
All right.
we're
Do we
almost.
have a giveaway? So hashtag joy. Do we have some hashtag joy so we can send to someone's?
Yeah, I think we may only have one that hasn't already won, so it'll be a little less suspenseful.
I know.
But
So this Terry won last time.
so
So
let's
I think I think we know who it's going to be.
Jasmine.
Right?
I hope it actually pops up, Jasmine. Yeah, there
I
it
mean, this
is.
is like, if the Yankees are in the World Series, like,
Oh,
you know who it's going to be.
no.
I wish I could say it's like the Cowboys are in the Super Bowl, but we know that's probably not happening. All right, Jasmine, you're our winner. Fire it up. You get an issue. I guess you can autograph it for yourself since you're in it. That's fabulous. Or give it to a friend. So
Yeah.
that's awesome.
And Jasmine, I have we'll hit that right over to you. This is I
Yeah.
love it. It's so much fun.
I love it. I love it. And then we have 2 more sessions coming after this, right? We have Joy Incarnate and we have Abiding Joy. So don't go away if you've been sticking around with us all day or if you just joined us, it's not too late. We still have 2 amazing sessions coming up.
All right. All right, well, hey again, everyone. Welcome back to another segment of our launch party. This is segment 5 entitled Joy Incarnate. And I'm here with Tom Darren Liskey and Seth Myers. My name is Zach Schmall. I'll be your host. And thank you guys for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having us on.
Thanks. Nice to meet Tom. This will be fun for me.
Nice to meet you, Seth.
He got the short end of the stick, probably, but
Oh, man. Well, before we dive in too deep, I'd love to have you introduce yourselves really quickly and also maybe tell us what you contributed. Tom, you're first for us. And, well, I won't spoil it. I'll let you talk about what you did. But we'll start with Tom, and then we'll introduce Seth after that. So, Tom, let's meet you.
Yeah, hi, thanks. So I did the first photo essay for y'all on Joy Incarnate. And I think when I read about the topic and trying to figure out what I do, because a lot of what I do is street and documentary photography. And kind of gritty, edgy stuff most of the time. So I was trying to figure out what joy, right? But then I thought about, then going through reading the Gospels again and reading the Psalms this year. And one of the things that I noticed about Jesus after reading so many times, that Jesus was a really good observer. He had a good eye among many other wonderful attributes. And it kind of struck me of the people I've stopped on the street from Mexico, Suriname, Guyana, London, people I thought were interesting just to kind of stop and talk to them. And I usually make stupid dad jokes most of the time, right? And so to try to get, to kind of break the ice. And so I thought, seeing joy etched on the face of strangers would be sort of unique, hopefully. And so that's what pretty much the essay was based on, just really seeing joy etched on human flesh. And, listening to the conversations today, it was really heartening to hear just about how joy really is an attribute, I guess, of the Holy Spirit, of joy, our Christian life. And so I think I chose a few unique palettes in the photo essay to talk about joy on these faces. So that's pretty much it right there.
Yeah, it was very cool. And when that idea came in to do a photo essay, I love it. I love the idea. And I think we have some of your photos shoot up. Yeah. So I think we have a few. So I love I don't know any of these people. And I know you said you met them all over the world.
Yeah. So I mean, like one of them was a Catholic church I did for a Palm Sunday or Ash Wednesday service. Some was a bridal. I speak Spanish and Portuguese, and so some of the young girls were a Spanish bridal party in Lisbon, and so stopped, talked to them. And I'm married to an Argentine, and the girl was married to an Argentine, and so we joked around about that. And so they let me take pictures of them doing their festivities on the street, and so yeah, different people, different places.
Oh, wow.
And I think, yeah, and so.
Mm-hmm. I do like the one guy with the red hat. I love his hat personally.
Yeah, that was Jimmy. I met him on Fleet Street one cold, rainy morning. I was trying to get into one of my favorite churches in London, and he was hovering near the McDonald's, and so we struck up a conversation. And interesting guy.
For sure. Wow. Well, I definitely want to dive into more of these individual stories and about them. But let me introduce Seth. So, Seth, I know you pretty well, but the people out there might not. So.
Sure. I usually at the end of the September, end of the summer, I always feel like we should have a few movie reviews in there. So I kind of did that. Yeah, I did the HCU now, right? Houston Christian University, or more inter-ecclesiastical now, I think. They just changed their name. So, there's C.S. Lewis's biography is Surprised by Joy, and he has a lot to say about it there. So I kind of used that as launching board for what I could. But I'm an engineer originally. I haven't been around the world like Tom has. Although I enjoy international things, so we probably have a lot of some common interests. I've done a lot of stuff with international students, and it's always interesting to see how our faith kind of might appeal, or how it speaks to people from different backgrounds. So I really enjoyed looking at through his pictures. But yeah, I was binge watching the Mentalist series a couple of seasons ago, half a year ago or something, and I was just kind of impressed. The guy's kind of a smart aleck, but he's kind of got, I call it kind of some residual joy, that even though he's kind of on this big quest to find the killer of his family, what keeps him going from day to day was sort of, kind of a practical level of joy. So that's kind of where I came from on this. So
that's super interesting, and it's a nice bridge because Seth, your article is obviously about joy as life fuel, right? And nice Top Gun reference in there.
Right,
And,
right.
but like motivation, right? And I mean, Tom, I don't know, and maybe you disagree with me. I don't know, but when I was looking at your photos, I mean, I was like inspired by the joy of these people, like to see them. And I don't know their stories. I don't know where they're at. But they seem to be able to communicate joy in some regard. And there's some motivation for, I mean, maybe it's just you telling them to smile at the camera. I don't know. But I'd love to hear about joy as a motivation from both of you guys. And let's start with Tom and then we'll go to Seth.
Yeah, no, I think, it's funny. You show the picture of the one young man, Chris, the two pictures, right, of him laughing. And so I have a trick with young guys and mainly men. When I'm taking their pictures, I say, don't smile. And then they start laughing. They get so nervous, they laugh. And so it's the easiest way to capture a sincere smile, right? And I think some of the other stories, some of the people, there was something, I think some Christians are called to do great things. Some Christians are called to missions and to lead groups and churches. I think the only thing that I feel like God has called me to do is to be present. And so 9 times out of 10, I'll be present with my camera talking to someone on the street. I've stopped, my gosh, over 700 people over the past several years, just based on something unique about them, right? Because I think this goes back to Christ. Christ saw the uniqueness in each individual. Christ saw something in these people, and Christ was a very compelling speaker, and he spoke to people, right? And I'm not comparing myself to that extreme any at all, right? But I like to talk to people, and I think as I get older, my kids call me a boomer, and one of my sons calls me a junior senior citizen because I like to talk to strangers, and sometimes, I can be funny. And so I try to use that to kind of really get to see the story in the person. And most of the time, that story is going to be in a smile.
That's awesome. And I love that. That's such it's such a heartening, like uplifting message. And you're right, everyone, it's easy to forget that, right? It's so easy for people to forget that, I don't know, maybe people have told them they're not valuable or they're worthless. I mean, I love that.
And I think it comes down to our relationship with Christ, right? Because it's like, Jesus saw value in me, even perhaps when a lot of people didn't. Christ saw something in me that other people didn't see, and give me the opportunity to have a relationship with him and to experience joy. The joy of a relationship with him, a joy of a healthy marriage, the joy of having children. Even with all the headaches and baggage and problems that come along with it, there's still that undercurrent, that aquifer of joy, right, in our lives that sustains us in the dry period.
Mm-hmm. And Seth, I'd love to bring you in here again on this idea of like joy as motivation, because that's what your whole article is about, but it's such an intriguing concept of like helping people realize this and realize like, man, your life is valuable and worth living and you matter. Those are important things.
Yeah, I mean, I had a much longer title, and you put a nice, a pithier, briefer, nicer title on it. But
yeah,
I was originally trying to get at like kind of two sides of. I was like joy was like life's fuel, but it's also like a safeguard. It kind of, you feel a threat to your joy, and there's some immoral something going on, and what Lewis says, the biggest of all the virtues is courage. It's every virtue at its testing point, and so you rise to the occasion to try to defend yourself or defend whatever needs defended. And so I kind of tried to trace both those aspects of it. It just kind of struck me, I'd watch The Mentalist. It's kind of like Monk. One time I compared Monk and The Mentalist because they're both kind of after their wife's killers in these 7-year-long mini series that they do, but he just kind of there's just kind of a sense of joy. It was a total vengeance fest. It probably get canceled after 2 or 3 years because people get tired of watching it. So, but when Tom mentioned, joy of family and stuff like that, and we had these vacation credits that were going to expire. So I'm down in the Caribbean actually right now for an Ohio, and we don't have palm trees like these. And Houston, I visited Houston one time. I'm like, wow, you have palm trees in your shopping mall parking lots. This is pretty interesting. So I'm trying to show those off. But it's where my wife and I had our honeymoon, a few decades ago. And it does sort of remind me, I mean, I think personally, I think I had a little, I mean, I'll throw all these C.S. Lewis quotes in here, but I mean, I think I kind of personally had a struggle with joy myself. At one point when in my 20s, I was dating this girl and she had some juvenile diabetes complications and she just passed away. And it was, I mean, there was a lot of strong feelings there. And I think I was sort of depressed. And, eventually, I grieved and I dated and, God gave me a wife and a family and children, and it helps you to move along. But actually it's like my older brother had come down here for a honeymoon. He said, oh, it's a nice, quiet place to go. So we came down. It's like, it's like I'd never seen a palm tree before in my life, and they have all the, the exotic, bushes and stuff. I could never get enough, tropical plants to put in our house. Although in Ohio, they'd always die pretty soon. But I can tie it all to a C.S. Lewis quote. I mean, he kind of had that struggle where, he loved stories and things like that. But he kind of went through, he called it his new look. This is in his Surprised by Joy book. And actually that title came from a Wordsworth line. He had a poem called Surprised by Joy. And he was dealing with grief also, because he'd had, back then you'd have 9 kids because, 4 of them would survive or whatever. But he's trying to remember the face of an infant that he had that had died as an infant. And he's like, I can hardly remember it. And somehow when I think he'd have spots of joy or something was kind of part of the Wordsworth theory. And so he's kind of bemoaning how he'd lost it. But with C.S. Lewis, he had these sparks of joy when he was young. One of them, some little toy garden he had, he said he gave me the sense of the enormous bliss of Eden, like from John Milton and things like that. But I don't know. Let me see. I've got my quote pulled up here. Where at one point he had, he was like somewhat depressed. He just, all his fairy stories, he thought, that it was just fairy stories. Nothing had any meaning. And then he kind of rediscovered that they really did have meaning. And he said, he mentions there was this elan vital philosophy going around the early 20th century by Henry Bergson. But I just love this quote. I've used it a lot. He goes, I learned to relish energy, fertility, and urgency, the resource, the triumphs, and even the insolence of things that grow. And it said it prompted him to appreciate flaming, unanswerable artists like Beethoven, Goethe, and the more exultant Psalms. And so, I mean, it's just kind of like he rediscovered the joy in life. And so that's a long story. I probably forget what the actual question was, but that's where I'm coming from on this, I think. And so it's kind of fun to live in the moment, enjoy the moment.
I love that. It's so great. And I wonder, I mean, you both have kind of hit on this topic in slightly different ways. But, I mean, Seth, you were talking about, joy and sorrow and wrestling with that. I mean, Tom, you were talking about how, I mean, these are people you don't know, you've never met. You don't know if they're joyful or not. And so I guess my question for both of you is, what does it mean, or what does it look like to be a person of joy? Because, I mean, I can smile convincingly for a camera. Seth, to yours, I can go to the movies or turn on my TV and get some pleasure out of it, right? It'll make me feel happy. I mean, I can do those things. But I don't know that, like, how do we embody joy? I guess that's the question. Like, how do we be people of joy? Because I don't know that it's just like fake smiling if we don't feel that way, or like going to a movie. Like, how do we do that? I'm curious. Let's start with, I don't know. Let's start with Seth this time. We're opposite this time.
Okay. I know. Yeah, you had a kind of a prompt question earlier about the difference between joy and happiness, and I mean that's a good that's a good question. I mean, you know, when I said live in the moment, I mean, anybody can do that. But I mean, for me, I mean, I had an advisor one time. He said, you know, I used to put a lot of pressure. I mean, he's an engineer and his dad was some engineer professor. And I always have all this pressure. And, you know, once I became a Christian, I was like, it's okay. You know, if I might mess up, fine. I mean, I've got eternity taken care of. And, you know, what's this life, you know? So, I mean, there's a little bit of a perspective like that, I think, is involved. I probably think better if I let Tom talk for a while.
No, you're right. But yeah, Tom, yeah, how do we embody joy?
You know, to me, it's I think it's the connection, right? You know, I think, you know, it's easy, as you say, it's easy to see, you know, joy etched on the face of someone you don't know, because you don't know if they're really happy or not, if they're joyful or not. But I think it's the connection. And I think, yeah, because I used to be a journalist, right? And so, you know, you used to have to ask very pointed questions back in the day. And one of the things, like, for example, the picture of the two young nuns that I took in Mexico, one of them, she was from Venezuela. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was learned Spanish in Venezuela. I lived in Venezuela. And her whole countenance changed, and she just opened up because, you know, the one on the left, Izimar. So there was that connection, and we started talking about the food of Venezuela. We were talking about the beautiful people, the countryside, crazy politics aside, but there was that connection, and that opened up a door, right? And so a lot of times when I'm talking to someone, you know, I'm not going to be talking to someone, you know, 2 or 3 hours on the street, just a few minutes. And in those few minutes, I want to know, what is their story? What is one thread to their story? I know it sounds very highfalutin saying this, right? But I want to know something about them. I want them to know that someone was interested in them. And so, you know, to me, that's it, trying to find the thread, trying to find that small narrative thread that says something about them. Because I'll share something about myself to them too. And so it tends to go that way. And I think, you know, one of the things that helps me, a lot of the pictures, you know, me being a foreigner in different countries and being interested in other people, you know, people in other countries tend to be very generous with their times if you're a foreigner, you know, and so that helps too, right? But I think it's just really trying to understand something about that person, because, you know, I'm kind of dense. I'm kind of thick, you know. I always joke around, you know, I'm belly crawling to the kingdom, you know. But, you know, the camera lens has really helped me to see God in unique ways and to understand Him in ways that only the camera could do. And so I think that's probably all mixed in together. You know, I know it's very vague kind of haberdash, you know, philosophy, but, you know, to me, it's just finding that one interesting thing that makes him unique, which Jesus really did a better job than me, right? But there's that something, I don't know. I like talking to people. I like talking to people.
I love that. And I mean, Seth, this is unscripted, so here we go off the script. But Seth, I mean, I think you probably resonate with that, given all of your work with international students. I mean, I imagine finding that one thing to connect on is really really important for you as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think they all have their sense of joy, I guess, in their own cultures. I mean, my mind kind of goes back to kind of the theme that I picked up on this, was that how, you know, you kind of safeguard it with, you know, kind of, you know, moral actions when you feel they're called for. And I mean, most every culture seems to have that. They have that recognition that, you know, there is something, what's the Samwise quote? There's something good in the world and it's worth fighting for, you know? Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody, you know, you go to C.S. Lewis's Abolition of Man at the back, he's got his encyclopedia of all these moral codes that you find in all the cultures. So everybody sort of recognizes that. And I mean, each culture, I mean, you know, you watch an Indian movie or something and, you know, they think India is like heaven almost, you know. I mean, they've got their Chinese the same way, Japan, I mean, they've got their own things they value. So it's there, but what it's based on, I guess, is the question, and yeah, I've lost the question now, so I'm starting to make stuff up. So
no, you're right. No,
yeah,
it's important, right? Because I mean, it's important to be able to connect to people over that shared element. I mean, C.S. Lewis talks about that, right? The Tao. It's the shared morality that we all have. It's part of being human, even if you don't always acknowledge it or live up to it. We know certain things are right, and we know certain things are wrong. It's just, God wrote it on our hearts. I mean, I think you're right with that.
Tom,
oh, sorry.
Yeah, when Tom mentioned Jesus, what's the verse where he said, for the joy that was laid before him, or something like that, he endured the cross, and that's one of my. I mean, how I wrap it up, I always like the, Chesterton's got this big long wall of text for his finale to orthodoxy, and he's like, I think there's, Jesus, demanded of the Pharisees, how they would escape the fires of hell, and he upended furniture when he was, upset at people, and he goes, I think there was one thing that he was almost too shy to communicate, and I sometimes think it was his mirth, and but then I'm like, Tolkien, he describes Aragorn, and Aragorn's the king, and so he's one of several Christ figures, but at one point he talks about how he it's in one of the appendixes that we had to read for one of our courses when we read the entire Lord of the Rings, but you can tell he's, for the heavy burden that's laid on him, he almost despairs, but he still had this joy that would break out, while he was doing it. And so, I mean, that's kind of the world in a nutshell. I mean, for the joy that's laid before us, we travail, so.
Wow.
And not just for ourselves, but for others too, I think, right? So.
Ooh, and that's a perfect bridge to the question I want to go to next, as we had to draw near to the end of our time. But I mean, okay, so we're talking about, we've talked about joy. We've talked about being, embodying joy, being people of joy. We've talked about all of these things, but how? I guess this is a pretty practical question, but as Christians, then, how do we communicate that joy to other people, right? Because just because we're Christians, we have the joy of the Lord, but we certainly don't always show it. So how do we, be these kinds of people that are radiating this joy? And I guess we'll start with Tom again, because Seth likes to do a second. So we'll start with Tom.
To me, it's hospitality. And hospitality just doesn't have to be a ready table or just an open door. I think the hospitality of a smile, the hospitality of a comment, the hospitality of just asking someone, how are you doing? I think, listening to the conversations of joy. At one point in my youth, I was surprised to find there was actually happy Christians, and so, and that's one of the things that, sometimes, you meet people and you just know there's something different about them. And so there's some element of hospitality or something hospitable about them and their spirit or just their personality. Christ, the Holy Spirit, but there's something there that draws you in. And so I say it's hospitality.
I love that. And you're speaking my language right there. It's community and hospitality are like I love reading about that and trying to figure out how to wrestle with those topics, and I love how you said, even the hospitality of a comment. You said it. I mean, we sometimes think hospitality, I have to leave my door unlocked and anybody can wander in at any time of the day or night, and I have to be up and ready with a pot of coffee and ready to talk. And sometimes it looks like that, but it doesn't always look like that. It can be, it can be much smaller, and yet, strangely, just as significant. Even, a good comment can change someone's day. It can literally change your entire day. I work in insurance during the day, and it's when you get that one nice response from someone because you helped them out and they appreciate it, it makes your whole day. Your day is so much better after that. Seth, how about you, man? Like, what do you think about how do we communicate this joy that we have, but how do we communicate it to other people?
Yeah, I mean, when Tom mentioned hospitality, I kind of, for some reason, I got in a kind of a world religions mode, and I'm thinking in terms of, the pressure that other religions tend to put on people because they all tend to be sort of works based. Like, like when you have to come back an infinite number of lifetimes to get pure enough to move on. That's basically a works based religion, right? You got to keep, it's way more than just be good for one life. So I mean, we have kind of a grace that others don't, and so it probably should produce in us a joy instead of kind of a feeling of pressure. I mean, some religions, they say you don't know until you die whether you've qualified or not. They'll have an angel sitting on either shoulder adding up your good and bad deeds. So we have a tremendous relief of pressure compared to devout people from other world religions anyway. That's kind of how I think of it.
I love that. No, that's a great comparison. And I see that we're almost at the end of our time together. So I'd love to leave you with two things. One, where can people find out more about you? If you have a website or anything like that. And also, I'd love just briefly, is there one thing that you would like people to take away from your piece? Is there something that really, you hope people look at it and say, man, I get blank. I get this. So let's I don't know. Let's start with Seth. Seth, you first. Where can we find you? And one takeaway.
In the journal.
Oh, literally every journal and
journal.
thousands of words.
Yeah, sometimes.
Seth is also very prolific. I said Donald is very prolific. Seth is very prolific as well.
They told us we would probably end up writing in our HBU program, so that's what we do. So, but kind of the dual nature. I think in terms of, I just think a lot of culture, what's out there in the culture, people don't understand the holiness of God. It would bring joy, but it's something that demands something of you as well. It demands something of you that you can't supply on your own, which is what our faith is all about. So I see it as it's kind of like two-sided. Right. That's kind of my fundamental insight I'm stuck on these days, I think.
No, that's awesome. And Seth's website is narnianfrodo.com. So you can read more about him there. He has a lot of Seth is prolific, what can I say? And Tom, how about you? Where can people find more about you and one takeaway?
Yeah, I'm on the Facebook, of course, Instagram, and Tom Darren Photo. I guess some of the more professional portraits works I've done. And I guess the only takeaway, which is for me, would really be just, to be present however God wants you to be present in someone's life, whether it's a stranger, a loved one, your wife, your son, to be present. And that's at least what I feel like I'm trying to do with these street portraits, is to be present, if just for a moment, and hopefully reflect the life of Christ, the joy of the Holy Spirit, and just my life as a Christian, even if it's just for a couple of minutes on a street in Mexico City.
No, that's awesome. And I think you do that beautifully. So thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for both being here with me today. I really appreciate it. I hope you had fun. I had fun.
Yeah, no, it was nice meeting Seth. It was a great article too, and thank you for letting me be on here too.
Sure, thank you. Yeah.
We have one more segment left. So Carice is coming back. She will be with Annie Nardoni and Ann Gallagher. So on the other side of the video, you will see them. Thank you, guys, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, bye.
welcome back. This is session 6, so it's our last session of the day, but stick around after the session for the big giveaway. You don't want to miss that, so don't go away. At the end of this session, I'm Bree Skillen. I'm here with Anne and Annie. I feel like I should change my name. I feel like I did not get the right name for this session, but I'm going to let y'all introduce yourselves. Anne, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Annie. Just introduce yourselves to our audience. Tell us a little about you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, my name is Ann Gager, rhymes with major, and I'm a scientist. I do intelligent design research and a lot of writing about it. And poetry and fiction are a hobby for me, where I get to express the more creative side of me. So.
Fantastic. What is your focus, would you say, in science? Your particular, what's the thing that drew you to science as what you're doing right now?
I first came to know God because I saw the beauty of creation, and I loved looking at living things, and they always struck me as having an essence to them that was beyond just molecules and chemistry. So I became a scientist to study living things, and well, it's a long story, but God led me through a path to get a PhD. I didn't plan to, and he led me to grade schools, which set me up so that when time came, I was called to be a scientist again. It just happened. It just happened.
You know, I think that's very imaginative apologetics, right? That's very like Frodo and Bilbo. The adventure sort of shows up at your door, and the Lord says, like, here's what you're going to do. And you say, great, let's do it. I think that sounds wonderful. And what you said reminds me about that quote where in Chronicles of Narnia, where they say to Eustace, even in your world, it's not just a star, it's not just a ball of gas. Like there's all these other things happening in science. That's why I asked you, because I thought maybe there might be a connection since you are a poet and a writer also. All right, Annie, tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Annie Nardoni, and I got my master's degree kind of with you, Carice.
Yay, all the HBU/HCU people.
Yes, just
name. I'm like,
and graduated in 2019 and have become a writer since. So I write for AUJ and I write for Cultivating Magazine at thecultivatingproject.com. And I teach 2 classes online at the Academy, one in creative writing and the other one I get to talk about art and music through 3,000 years. I wrote the curriculum this year, and it's so much fun because I get to show kids the thread of holiness in art and how we've expressed it through the history of mankind. So I can barely contain myself, and I go countless rabbit trails, and now my kids have come to expect the rabbit trails.
Well, that sounds amazing, and I know that you're a wonderful teacher from experience. So,
thank you.
I'm so happy that y'all are here with us today, talking about abiding joy. Both of you did write poems, and I'm going to ask actually that you each read yours at some point. So I think, Anne, we're going to read Home at Last and pull it up on a slide. And Annie, if you would read your sonnet at the end as kind of our wrap up, like our close, because I think it's just so, I don't know, it just encapsulated it all for a wrap up. So I thought it was great.
Great.
Before we read, Carla's popping the slide up. Pop it off, Carla. Before we read that, though, I want to talk about the idea of joy versus happiness, because you both really talk about that in your pieces. Annie, yours, joy is a deep and abiding, enduring, emotion. It's not transitory. That comes and goes like the tide. Can you, each of you, just kind of expand on the idea of joy versus happiness. Annie, wherever I'm pointing, Annie, would you go first?
Would you like me to go first?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay, great.
Everyone has got the same name.
If I'm trying to keep my cat from gate crashing on our recording.
Yes. Your cat would like the joy of being in this.
Yes, my delightful, joy-filled cat. I think joy, as I described it in my essay, it has to be deep and abiding. Happiness is fun. Happiness is getting a box in the mail. Happiness is seeing Amazon drop off a book in my mailbox. Happiness is seeing my granddaughter play soccer. But that is momentary. And then joy is something that is deep and abiding, that you don't lose. And in my article, I wrote about the donegality that Lewis speaks of, that sticks with you. You can't describe it. There are no words really that will fit. It's just something that you know and you feel inside. I get that when I go back to my hometown and I smell the air, I see the fields, I talk to the people. It's this overwhelming feeling of, yes, this is good, this is right, this is beautiful, this is holy. And it's a more transcendent feeling, I think, than just happy.
Yeah.
So that's how I would describe it.
That's great. And I love that you brought up the idea of donegality. Would you expand on that just a little bit in case there's somebody in our audience who isn't familiar with that?
Oh, sure. I think what I'll do is I'm going to go right to the master.
I love it. I love it. To the source.
To the source. In an allegory of love, Lewis coins the term of donegality to describe the tone of a good story. Lovers of romance go back and back to such stories in the same way that we go back to fruit for its taste, to air for what? For itself, to a region, for its whole atmosphere, to Donegal for its donegality, to London for its Londonness. It is notoriously difficult to put these tastes into words. And I said that joy and donegality go together. When I visited Oxford this past summer for 2 weeks, I had seen these pictures of the beautiful cathedrals. I've seen the pictures of the Thames and the Bridge of Sighs and all of that. And it was very two-dimensional, which I think happiness is two-dimensional. I think joy is three-dimensional. It soaks in your bones. And when I went to Oxford and I actually touched walls that were 900 years old, and I smelled the air, and I saw the cobblestone streets, there was a sense of overwhelming joy that I could not put into words, but I can still feel it. So now when I see those photos, it all comes back to me.
You feel all of that with it.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm a Texan, so I totally get that. All right, Anne, you want to talk to us about the difference between joy versus happiness?
One of the things I'd like to just touch on that you were just talking about is the donegality. Do you remember the last book that C.S. Lewis wrote from the Narnia Chronicles? The one that deals with the subject of the end of the world and the coming of the reality of heaven to everybody. The children are all killed in a train accident, and but their parents weren't, but their sister wasn't. And they were mourning the loss of the world that they knew until it was explained to them that there was a true London present, a true England present, and there was a true, all the places that they loved, there were true versions of them, truer versions of them in heaven. And I think I like to think about that as whatever we find that makes us happy in the best sense, it leads to joy in the fulfillment that God brings to it. So we know. Okay, I'll tell a personal story. I didn't get married until very late, and that's another whole story about how God led me to my husband. And I remember when my first child was born, looking at them in amazement and thinking, how did this happen? This little person, this new person, came from my husband and me, but she's her own self. And the joy that I felt was just amazing. And like you said, it's enduring, but it's not always on the surface. You know, when she did something I didn't like, I wasn't feeling joyful. But
like 3 a.m. not a lot of joy.
Yeah. But it was when I returned to thinking about the things that mattered, the joy was there. So I like to think of it as more this poignant sense of longing for the ultimate being with God and where we're meant to be finally. That's for me what brings joy.
Well, I love the idea that you brought up too, where the happiness we have in some ways are little tastes kind of the joy, like little glimpses of the joy. It's like a tiny spark compared to a raging fire, I guess. But that maybe even those little happinesses that we think of that are fast and are over quickly still are these little like flashes, right? Oh, Zach said that's his favorite Chronicle of Narnia. So good pick. Yes, I thought that was a great point. And now, Anne, are you ready to read Home at Last for us?
Okay, I'll give you a really short background. I started this poem 40 years ago when I was in a really tough place and I wasn't feeling joy, but I was feeling longing. And it takes me, it expresses what I think about what brings me joy. Home at last. Homesick, hungry, weary, lonely, hearts beleaguered yet unbowed. Still we seek thee, ancient beauty, shining prospect glimpsed through cloud. Bright horizon, distant city, where our joy cries out, receive, where our hearts are stilled and gentled, love the atmosphere we breathe. Hearts that long for such a morning find no ease in emptiness. Ancient beauty, sate our yearning, slake our thirst for holiness. For with thee the new day dawning, soft and sweet, all dread now ceasing, peace and righteousness shall kiss, and joy will ring out love's great feast.
Fantastic. I love that. Can you just talk us through a little bit? I love the fact that you have the story, the backstory to it, where it has taken all these years to like come to fruition in poetic form. Can you talk us through some of the things that you chose to put in the poem and why you chose them?
Okay. Homesick, hungry, weary, lonely. That's exactly how I was feeling at the time. And beleaguered yet unbowed means, I felt like I was facing all kinds of difficulties, but I wasn't going to give up. I seek ancient beauty symbolizing God. St. Augustine called God beauty ever ancient, ever new. Bright horizon. So I can see it in the distance, but I'm not there yet. Distant city. And I'm anticipating that's the place where I will receive joy, where my heart will be stilled and gentled. It won't be troubled by anxiety or fear. Love the atmosphere we breathe. So love will fill all and be all. Love the atmosphere we breathe. hearts that long for such a morning find no ease in emptiness. I meant we don't find any pleasure in passing things or things that are just superficial. It doesn't give us the joy that we want. Like you were saying, Annie, that getting something in the mail from Amazon is a fleeting joy. It's not a fleeting happiness, but it doesn't last. I am well acquainted with the fact that buying clothes won't make me happy for very long. So I ask for God to fill me, to take away my yearning, to give me the things that I long for, holiness. For with thee, the new day dawning, soft and sweet, all dread now ceasing. That's what I envision it to be like when I finally meet God. And peace and righteousness shall kiss. That's a reference to scripture. And joy will bring out love's great feast. I'm a Catholic, so that reference to the great feast is the reference to our celebration of the Lord's Supper. We call it the Eucharist. And Jesus' gift to us. So
beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for unpacking that for us. And as we went through, I was struck too by, and I've kind of been thinking about this all day because I've been doing this all day, how so much of our ability to cooperate with the joy God is giving us depends on ordered affections and loving the right thing. And you touched on that in your poem. You talk about not wanting the empty things, right? But like your heart aligning with the will of God and with the things that God wants. And how in that, then I'm going to find that joy I'm really looking for sometimes in those wrong things, right? Like maybe in Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was reflecting while I was listening to everybody else earlier that God's prescription for how to find joy is in the Beatitudes.
Okay, I think you're right on with that. Talk us through that somewhat.
So God's view of what should bring us joy is actually sort of countercultural. And that he says, blessed are the poor, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are you when men persecute you for the sake of Christ. That is, I mean, he says you're blessed when you're hungry, when you mourn, when you give yourself over to him in all circumstances. When you do the things he asks, when you show mercy when you don't feel like it, when you surrender the things you need to get rid of to him, or the sufferings that come, surrendering to him, saying, all right, this comes from you, I will accept it, even though I don't like it very much.
Yeah, honestly, I don't love it, but here we are, right? And the Beatitudes, interesting list, because it's almost like top 10 things you would not ask for in your life, like, oddly. And I think you're so right. The world is such a contrast. But God says, and St. Paul says, in my weakness, right, then God's on full display. And I think that's some of the idea of the Beatitudes. And some of the idea of joy is actually knowing the whole world does not depend on you. You, as it turns out, we're not actually running this thing. So, yeah, I love that. That's a great pull out from the Beatitudes. Annie, I was wondering about the question of finding joy. So both of your poems deal with finding joy, either seeing it or looking for it, and then ultimately finding it. So one of the questions I know that we had kind of been thinking about to talk about for this was, we know that it points to the fact that there's something else out there, right? We see those things in nature and science. We see those things in poetry that points to the fact that there's something other than whatever this is. Specifically, would you have a word of encouragement as people who I think are writing about finding joy? And you know, Anne, you had said like it was a time I wasn't feeling joyful. A word of encouragement to people, since this is our last session, about finding joy when things are just so difficult and when it just seems like everywhere you look, you know, it's just a train wreck.
Mm-hmm.
So Annie, would you talk a little about that first, and then we'll go to Anne?
Sure. Joy is where you open yourself to finding joy. If you go in hot pursuit of joy, I don't think that works.
No.
Like, I have to be joyful today, so I'm going to be finding something that really, because that's just happiness and that's fleeting, like Anne said.
Mm-hmm.
Joy is taking a minute and taking a breath and just looking out.
Mm-hmm.
Don't look down, look out. And live a life of awe, I think, is probably, like today we went for a walk down on the beach. And the beach just calls me.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't just go for a walk on the beach. I stand there and I look at it. And today my moment of awe is watching waves come in and how there is a pattern. And then the dark blue of the water with the brilliant blue of the sky, and being amazed at the little things. It's the little things that show you that there is mystery. Why do these waves, like the waves were coming in a herringbone pattern? If we think waves, we think they roll in these lovely horizontal lines. They don't. They come in a herringbone. They come in overlapping. Then suddenly one will just break from the flat surface of the ocean and slap down. And that stood there 10 minutes thinking about how amazing that is. And that water held up Greek boats,
Mm-hmm.
the pilgrims' boats, ship boats, explorers, that same water, that same body of water. And then you get that overwhelming feeling of awe that this is amazing. I look at the palm trees outside of my window growing with their fronds in a certain way and their bark falls away in a certain way. And I just can't help but be in awe. And I think awe is what gives me joy. So
I love that. And that there's a humility in awe, right? Like, what does he say? You know, I'm just a little fellow. You're just a little fellow in the wide world after all, right? We realize like, oh, okay. I'll go ahead and I'm just little, you know?
Yeah. We had a walking stick crawling up our screen today. And I went outside and just stared at that walking stick and thought, how on earth does this thing exist? Beyond explanation.
Yeah.
It's it looks like a piece of straw moving up my screen. And I was utterly amazed at this goofy looking bug. But if you don't stop moving, stop moving.
Right.
Be still. Be still and know that I am God. And I think that's one of my favorite go-tos. Be still and know that I am God. Oh, right. I'm not in charge. Or, yeah.
And how many times does the Bible talk about like joy in the presence of the Lord? Just still ourselves and go to him and be with him. But it requires us saying, okay, everything else isn't as important. And that's hard for us because if it's, you know, in front of our face, we get really distracted.
Yes.
Anne, would you talk about a word of encouragement? And you've given it in your poem, I think, but just in a prosaic form, a word of encouragement. If you're thinking back to that time and you're thinking, what would have been encouraging to hear? So if we have somebody watching today and it's just a struggle, like it's hard for them to find right now, what would you say to that person?
Well, when I was younger, I would not have been able to say this, but you were talking about the scripture, "Be still, my soul, know that I am God." Excuse me. You know the song, "Be still, my soul, for God is on my side." Do you know the story behind that song? Why he wrote it? He was, I believe, he was a minister, and his wife and children were sailing to come where he was, and the ship went down. So he wrote that song in surrender and acknowledgement that God was with him even in this dark tragedy. And he was trying to recover his sense of joy in the face of this darkness. For anybody who suffers, the hardest part, excuse me, I've got a tickle in my throat. The hardest part is accepting it. And okay, from my personal experience, I was recently diagnosed with a condition that is ultimately fatal. Life is ultimately fatal, but some of it's earlier than others. And at first I was just, devastated, anxious, all of that. But then I remembered that meant I was going to get to see Jesus sooner. I wouldn't have to wait. And it also meant, he must think I'm ready, which is also a source of joy. And it's that perspective of saying, okay, God knows what he's doing. We don't always know what he's doing. It certainly doesn't always feel very good. Crises come to our lives. It can be divorce. It can be illness. It can be problems with our children. As long as we come to accept and trust, God can restore our joy. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. It is very hard. And sometimes it's almost impossibly hard. You can't do it without the grace of God.
No. And it doesn't mean, sometimes we confuse restoring joy with restoring circumstances. And so in our human nature, we want that fixed. We want it to be like it was, or like it could be if everything were perfect. And I think sometimes that's what's hard about accepting it, because we have this hope or idea, and the circumstances don't change, but we abide in him, and that's where we find our joy.
Yep.
Y'all, we're just at the little tiny end of this, so I want to get Annie's, wherever I'm pointing, Annie's comment in before we go as our wrap up, and then I'd like for you to each tell where we can find you for your writing. So Annie first.
All right. My poem is called Creation. It's a sonnet. Red sky is only sun's refracted light. Green shades of plants are colored by mere chance. White strands of clouds, just vapors in our sight. Stars are not illumined, heavenly dance. Winged flocks fly south on their appointed day. Their season's journey starts uncued each year. The fragrant buds come forth in bright array to coax each bee to nectar sweet and clear. Each life sings of its given purpose, yet will marvel at this world and call it chance. Complexity that is so clearly set, it was his plan to bring us to this dance. Creation shouts to say, there's someone else. From cell to sea, you pull us to yourself.
Oh, I love it. What a perfect wrap up for this day. It's so fantastic. I love it. That was just providential that you were going to be here, and that was going to be it.
Yes.
I want to give y'all a chance to say, here's where I write, or here's my website. So Annie, if we can start with you.
Okay, Unexpected Journal. Here we are. And the Cultivating Project online is Christian online magazine. We do have some in print. And my website is literarylife.org.
All right. And Anne, where do we find you besides our latest issue of An Unexpected Journal?
Well, I have a Substack, angager.substack.com. And I also write for Evolution News and Views, and there's a whole backlog of my essays if you look me up there. And there's going to be a book coming out in spring of this next year, published by, oh gosh, I knew I was going to forget this, Sophia Institute Press.
Oh, okay.
And it's called God's Grandeur. It's a collection of essays by philosophers, theologians, scientists on the subject of how we see God in creation.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Congratulations. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
really
y'all,
terrific.
it's been so awesome having you with us today. Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Annie. And y'all, we're now headed to our last little mini session, which is a big, big giveaway. So hashtag joy in the comments and join us there.
Thank you.
This has been so fun. It was such a fun day talking about joy, hearing from all the authors. Like, thanks everybody in our audience who joined us and all of our writers. And extra thanks to Carla Alvarez, who is our technology wizard / genius and makes this all happen. So thank you to Carla.
And thank you, Chris, too, for coming in today. I know we kind of threw you in the deep end and like, hey, we're going to do a full slate of panels today.
All right.
And
It's
you were
super
awesome.
fun.
It's just so great. I hope, at least when I interview people, it's so fun to hear the story behind the story. And
Yes.
you've seen that in all your panels today, too.
Yeah, I love it. I love when people say, well, actually, I have a story about this. And here's the idea I was working on, or however many years ago this happened. And now it's come to fruition like this. It's just a reminder of the faithfulness of God and that he takes everything that happens to us and redeems that and makes it his work. Everything that Satan would try to throw at us to steal our joy, the Lord takes it and makes it something for his goodness and for his pleasure and for his perfect will. So it's a joy to spend the day talking with people who are just lining it up with the Lord in their writing.
Mm-hmm. And I hope that people take away from this. If I asked on my panels at one takeaway, and if I had one takeaway from this, I hope that people will take away that, well, first of all, the separation between joy and happiness, because just because you might not be happy at a moment, just because circumstances are not going your way at a particular moment, just because something authentically really difficult, I mean, we're not minimizing suffering here, but you're still capable of receiving joy from God. And I mean, man, if we all could actually be open to receiving that, I feel like it would, it would just change how we act towards everyone, how we treat others, and that, it would show the love of Christ better. And I hope that's what people take away from this, that, we have that opportunity to receive the joy of the Lord anytime.
And to cooperate with that. And we just open our hands to him, right? He is looking to bless us, I think. And then we can bless other people because we're always blessed by joyful people. I've been incredibly blessed by everybody that I've gotten to talk to today who has the joy of the Lord and has expressed that in our journal. So I'm super thankful and I feel very encouraged.
Me too. And I'm really excited too because we have a few entrants into our last drawing, so there'll be a little drama.
We're gonna have some drama. It's like our lives up in here. Let's go. Like we're gonna see who wins.
Yeah, I know, right? Let's give it a whirl. Let's give it a shot.
All right, here we go, y'all. Several people. Jasmine,
right.
you won last time. You don't get to win again. Sorry.
Right. Sorry, prior winners.
That's right. You already won. You already have Joy coming in your mailbox.
And this is a whole year subscription, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, this is a big prize, y'all. Really, really big.
I mean, we're saving you $50. We love you. So.
I know. Well, yeah, and you get an unexpected.
Oh, same one in. Resend.
Resend. That's hilarious.
I know. I don't. I love this program because you get like confetti and fun things like that. I wish we had like. I don't
know how to like take people out. Yeah, that's all right. Terry knows. She knows she already won.
Yeah. Terry's gonna win again, probably.
Terry won already. Terry, you won already. Yay. Knows he won.
Oh, man. All right. Third time's the charm.
We'll try again. Sorry, Terry.
All right. We love you, Terry. We really do.
Yeah, we do. We love you. You won the first time, but you just can't win again.
There we go, Taylor.
Hey, Taylor.
All right. Thank you, Taylor. All right. So, yeah, just shoot us a message with your name and your address, although I think we already know how to get in touch with you. But, yeah, send it over, and we will get that to you. Oh, man. Well, I don't know. Sharice, do you have any kind of last thought that you want to leave people with before we...
I would just say that I guess everything we've been saying, it's just been a wonderful day and a great blessing to be here. And I thank you for inviting me. And I hope everyone will get the latest issue of An Unexpected Journal so they too can get a little joy in their mailbox.
Exactly. All right. Thank you, everyone. And until next time, we'll see you then.
Bye, everyone.